Hello there and welcome to the Bitcoin Takeover podcast. This is season 16, episode 56. This is still the show that dares to ask the questions that most podcast hosts don't even have the courage to utter. And we are live with Super Testnet. It's his second time on the show this season and possibly the fourth or fifth time overall. And he
Hi,
has
everybody.
been,
Good to hear from you.
yeah, it's been since February that we haven't spoken. And last time we actually spoke about your campaign to prove that Lightning Network is superior for privacy to Monero. That was actually an interesting attempt. And I also hosted a debate, but that was for Layer 2 Labs on their Twitter
Thank
Spaces.
you for your service.
And right now you're here to talk about your latest work, which is called Papa Swaps.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on your show. It's always an honor to be here, and good to hear from your audience. Well, I got your questions pulled up from Twitter and Nostr, so we'll be diving into those at some point as well. You want to dive right into Papa Swaps?
Yeah, I think that's the hot topic. What I like about you is that you're moving very fast from one job to the other, and you always find something new and interesting that you develop.
Thank you. So recently I've been exploring submarine swaps. Have you ever done a submarine swap, Vlad?
No, but I know, I mean, not directly, because Submarine Swap basically is going from the layer 2 to the layer 1, doing this instant swap,
or
which
vice
is
versa.
at the protocol level. But I did do other types of swaps, right? Like with Phoenix or whatever. I don't think that's a Submarine Swap. It's just a swap that has a third party in the middle, which basically is giving you the liquidity on the other side, on the other layer.
Yeah, you seem to know quite a bit about it. So just as a high level overview for people who may not have used them before, one of the things that is annoying about the Lightning Network is that it's the way that you receive money in Lightning is not compatible with old styles of Bitcoin addresses or Bitcoin wallets. It doesn't give you a normal Bitcoin address. It gives you something called a Lightning invoice or a Bolt 11 invoice, and a normal Bitcoin address can't pay them. So someone came up with this idea called a submarine swap, which is where you can atomically, that means make it so that if the Bitcoin address tries to pay, a Lightning invoice, you can make it so that the Lightning invoice only gets paid if the Bitcoin transaction goes through as well. And that's a pretty cool thing. Then you can do these in both directions, and it's called submarine swaps because you're going from one layer to another, just like submarines go from the surface to below the surface, or vice versa. So one of the I use them occasionally because I don't know, they're kind of useful. If I'm trying to pay someone and I have a Lightning wallet and they have a regular Bitcoin wallet, it's useful to be able to do that with a submarine swap service. But I really like Phoenix. Phoenix wallet is a Bitcoin wallet that doesn't use submarine swaps to do this. Instead, they do something called splicing. And I really like doing it with a splice because it is cheaper. Basically, if I got, let's say I have $1,000 in my Lightning wallet and I want to pay you $50 on layer 1, I can do something called a splice, which is where in one transaction we basically close my channel and simultaneously open a new one with $50 less in it, and then $50 goes out to whatever Bitcoin address I wanted to pay. And that's cool. That's like a really efficient way, I think, to use the Lightning Network. But when I was in Mexico, I was talking to a guy who about this, and about Phoenix, and I was telling him how great Phoenix is, and he was like, "Oh, I tried Phoenix, but there's one thing I don't like about it, which is that whenever I pay someone on the base layer, my capacity drops. Because let's say he had let's say he had $10,000 of total capacity in that channel, of which 1,000 was his, and the rest was the channel counterparties. Well, once he pays that $50, that balance goes down from 10,000 to 9,950. And he was like, I don't like that. I paid for that capacity. Now, if someone's trying to top up my wallet, it can't go as high as it could before. And so what he did, what he found as a workaround, was to use submarine swaps. Because if you use a submarine swap service, like Boltz Exchange, for example, they don't learn this. Nothing changes about your channel capacity, just your balance shifts within that channel, which is what he wanted. Of course, I was like, that's interesting because those are more expensive. A submarine swap takes 2 transactions. You have to fund a smart contract called an HTLC, and then you have to sweep funds from it in a second transaction. And when I was talking to him about this, a light bulb kind of clicked in my head, and I was like, oh, wait a second. I think there's a way to do submarine swaps in one transaction. And it has to be possible because splicing works. Splicing is one transaction and accomplishes the same effect as a submarine swap. You change which layer you're on with only one transaction. So I started cogitating on that and trying to look up how how Phoenix does it with their wallet, how they do the splices, and I came up with a protocol that lets you do this on a regular without needing to run Phoenix. So I wrote out a specification for the protocol, made up a demo implementation, a proof of concept, and I've been trying to present it at different Bitcoin conferences and things, and hopefully get wallets to support it and exchanges to support it as well, because it has like 4 benefits. The submarine swaps, when they use Papa swaps, they get faster because there's only one transaction instead of 2. They get cheaper because there's only one transaction instead of 2, and they get more efficient in terms of block space usage because, again, there's only one transaction instead of 2. So it's like all benefits for why to use them. Okay, so that's where the idea came from, and a general overview of we're trying to go from layer 1 to layer 2 or vice versa in one transaction. That's the what. Now, do you want to know the how? Is that a good next step?
The how, and also why did you choose to call them Papa swaps? Like, why is it Papa?
So the name came from me trying to think of interesting things about submarines, and I looked up a Wikipedia article and I said, what's the fastest submarine that was ever built? And it turns out it was called the Soviet K222. And I was like, well, I don't want to call these the Soviet K222 swaps. That's an unwieldy name. But the Americans during the Cold War, the Americans and the Soviets during the Cold War kept building bigger and faster submarines, and they classified each other's submarines as they came out of production and started being used in the war. And the Americans called the Soviet K22 222. They called it the Papa class of submarines. And so that was the fastest submarine, was in the Papa class. And I thought Papa swaps sounds funny, so I picked that name for the protocol because it sounds funny and it refers to very fast submarines, which these are very fast submarine swaps.
That's amazing. Maybe that's also why you called your protocol the Hedgehog one, because in video games, who's the fastest character of them all? Well, it's a hedgehog.
Sonic the Hedgehog. Yeah, it was similar. I was
Sega.
trying to. I also all the lightning puns were used up. There's Boltz as a lightning pun, and voltage, and blitz, and all those things have been done to death in the lightning world. And I wanted to open up a new realm of puns to use in naming things. And I thought hedgehogs are cool. There's lots of stuff you can do with those. They got tines, they got tails, they got characters from the video games. There's movies about them and stuff. So I thought, hey, let's do that. Hasn't really taken off though. And that gets to the first of our questions from from Twitter. From Nostr. Someone asked, when Hedgehog? This question came from I can't find it. Saunter asks, when Hedgehog? And the answer is probably never. It's I seem to be the only developer who is interested in Hedgehog channels, and even I don't really work on them except when I want to do a show and tell at a conference. And really, I think these things tend to only take off if somebody commercializes them, which I don't want to do. So if the only developer who's interested in them doesn't want to commercialize them, then I don't think they're going to do anything other than get me to more conferences. So yeah, that's the answer to your question. But I haven't told you how Papa swaps work yet. So is that the next question, or do you want do you have any other questions before we get to that?
I sort of like how you're doing my job. Like, you're picking questions from the audience and you're answering them, and then you're like, does it make sense for you to ask me this question as a follow-up? And I'm like, yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay. By the way, make sure you subscribe and hit the little bell icon if you're interested in receiving more content like this on YouTube. The algorithm sometimes it helps to have the little bell icon hit. So give us a like, give us a thumbs up. It's always free. And why don't you subscribe while you're at it?
And leave feedback because it's important, especially on Spotify or whatever.
Yeah,
I think the podcasts that have the most star
stream
ratings are the ones that show up when you type Bitcoin.
Yeah, the little thumbs up always helps. And make sure you comment a question below if you want me to answer it on the live stream. We've also got the little sidebar tracker. I'm checking in there to see if there are any questions as well. So, okay, so how do Papa swaps work? They change from using absolute time locks to using relative time locks, which is something I do in a lot of my projects. That's also the main difference between Hedgehog and regular Lightning channels, is that I try to do everything with relative time locks because I think they're more flexible for the kinds of stuff I want to do with them. So normally in a submarine swap, you create something called an HTLC, and this is one of the smart contracts that Bitcoin natively supports, and that actually has a lot of software written for it and is widely understood by Bitcoin developers. So the way it works is typically, let's say that you and I wanted to do a submarine swap, Vlad and Super. The script would say, Vlad is going to put some Bitcoin into this HTLC, and the script says Vlad can take his money back if I don't do anything. If I just like abandon the protocol, Vlad can take his money back after, let's say, 10 blocks go by. Otherwise, if before that happens, I can take the money if I reveal something called if I reveal a secret, which is called a pre-image. I have to reveal a secret on the blockchain. It's usually a 32-byte secret, which Vlad doesn't know in advance, but I do. If I reveal that, then I can take the money and I don't have to wait. Once we've created this contract on chain, before he funds this with real Bitcoins, we make a Lightning invoice that's locked to that same secret, that same pre-image. And so now I have to pay that invoice, and then he has to reveal the secret to settle the Lightning invoice. But of course, he doesn't know the secret. I know the secret. But once he has that pending Lightning payment, he then funds the Bitcoin address. I reveal the secret in order to take the money on the base layer. And once now that he can see the secret on the blockchain, he can now settle the Lightning invoice and get the money on Lightning. And that's how the swap works. But that's two transactions, one to fund the address and one to take it back out. So the time lock that we use in submarine swaps is an absolute time lock. We find out whatever block is 10 blocks from now, and we say that's the block height at which he is able to take the money if I abandon the protocol. I changed that to a relative time lock. And the difference with a relative time lock is you don't have to know which block height it is in advance. Just once money enters the address, that's when the timer starts ticking. And you'd say then once 10 blocks go by, regardless of what the current block height is, once money enters this address, 10 blocks go by, then Vlad can take the money. So I substitute absolute time locks for relative time locks, which is the first change that I made to the submarine swap protocol. And then I make it the sad path in a two-party situation. So often in the systems that I work on, there's something called a happy path and a sad path. And usually it starts with a 2 of 2 multisig, meaning that he and I both have to agree on how to spend the money. And so I use that in this case. What we actually do instead of funding an HTLC is we fund a 2 of 2 multisig, where he has a key and I have a key. And from that 2 of 2 multisig, we sign a transaction which lets us put the money into the HTLC, but we don't actually end up doing that in the happy path. So if I abort the protocol, then he's going to fund the HTLC with this relative time lock. And once the relative time lock expires, he takes the money out. That's the sad path. And that's actually 3 transactions instead of 2, which is worse. So Papa swaps are worse in the sad path because there's 3 transactions instead of 2. But in the happy path, which is where everything goes according to plan, what happens is I pay his Lightning invoice, and then I obtain the secret. So this is another difference between Papa swaps and regular submarine swaps, is that in regular submarine swaps, the person on Lightning creates the secret, the person who's on Lightning and wants to go to the base layer. Whereas in Papa swaps, I have the other party, Vlad in this case, he was the one who creates the secret. So now I have to basically purchase that secret by means of the Lightning Network. And once I have purchased it, there is a clause in our smart contract, in our 2 of 2 multisig, that says, if I know the secret, then I can spend the money unilaterally. I don't need to deposit into the HTLC. I can just spend it unilaterally just by knowing that secret and knowing my own private key. And that makes it so that now there's only been one transaction on the base layer. We funded that Bitcoin address, then I paid his Lightning invoice, and the Lightning invoice gets paid on layer 2, so there's no on-chain transaction there. And once I paid it, now I know the secret. That gives me control of the money in this address without having to actually put it into the relative time-locked HTLC. So the happy path is faster because we could just put money in this one address. I got the secret on Lightning, and now I have full control of that money. There's a caveat, which is the sad path still exists, and if he wanted to, he could put the money into the HTLC. He's got a signed transaction that lets him do that. But even if he does, it's fine because the HTLC says he has to wait 10 blocks, for example, to take the money out of there, whereas I do not. I have the secret now, and so I can take the money from the HTLC immediately. So even if he does put it in the HTLC, it's still he's just falling back to the regular. He's falling back to the sad path. I don't actually lose any money. So yeah, that's how Papa swaps work. They make it so that you only have one transaction in the happy path and 3 in the sad path. And I think that is better than the 2 transaction protocol that the traditional submarine swaps use. So does that explain the how for you, or do you have any follow up on that?
No, honestly, it makes a lot of sense, to be honest. Like, if I was to design this, I would make it the same way. Because I think more than 90-something% of the transactions have the happy ending, or the happy path, as you call it. But at the same time, there are still trade-offs, like the user on the Lightning side, who basically pays to reveal the secret from the base layer, has to be sure that there's not going to be some sort of double spend, right?
No, actually, it's perfectly fine. He doesn't lose money if there is a double spend. So the normally in these situations, yes, what he has to do is wait for a confirmation. So once money enters the Papa Swap smart contract, if he gives the secret without waiting for that to confirm, or if he pays the Lightning invoice rather without waiting for that to confirm, then the person who put money into the smart contract can then double spend the money that isn't confirmed yet and take it back.
Because I guess right now we speak in a world where RBF is enabled by default, and most users can.
And even if it wasn't, it was only ever a mempool policy, which is overridable, and so there was software for doing this even back, since many years ago. There's been software for ignoring the mempool policy that enforced RBF, so it was never safe to use RBF transactions in a context like this. That said, most submarine swap services are provided by well-known companies that are like publicly traded and stuff, and if you're doing like a $10 submarine swap, I certainly trust that they're not going to try and double spend me and thus lose a customer. So I always fast forward and just give him the secret right away to get the thing over with. And so far, I haven't gotten wrecked on my little small $10 transactions of using submarine swaps. But yeah, that is a danger. You could be wrecked. So don't do that for large amounts. It'd be my recommendation.
Yeah, that's fair. At the same time, do you have any projections as to how much block space you think you can save if you're using this one? In relation to how many of these contracts exist on chain and how they usually get solved?
That I don't know. I never thought to look into it. I would want. I think the only large. No, I was about to say the only large user of submarine swaps is Boltz Exchange, but that's not true. Moon Wallet also uses them, and they have their own submarine swap server. And Lightning Loop is another large thing that uses them. So I'd have to look up how many transactions are there from Moon Wallet, how many are there from Lightning Loop, and how many are there from Boltz, and then sum them and say, okay, take that and divide it by 2, and that's the way that's the amount of savings you can get by using this new protocol. But I don't know. I haven't done that math. I imagine it is on the order of hundreds of transactions a day that you could save. But that's just a guess. I have not actually looked into the statistics.
Right now, given that the mempool is almost empty, or there are a lot of low fee transactions, some of them even sub 1 Satoshi per VByte, I presume that some miners will not be happy to enable this because they might be losing a lot of the revenue. But at the same time, it is a very efficient way in a world where the blocks get filled regularly. Like, this can be actually, the Papa swaps actually make a lot more sense than the default submarine swaps.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, while fees are low, no one's really caring that they save 5 cents by doing it in one transaction instead of 2. But this could be important. At least I used to use Moon Wallet a lot and recommended it to other people and it works great when fees are low, but when fees get high, it stops working very well because there's two base layer transactions for lots of Moon Wallet transactions. But with this protocol, they could do all of them in one transaction, and so that it would make it last longer into a high fee scenario. Their fees would have to get twice as high for it to be the same amount of pain. So that's useful it's useful in a high fee scenario. Of course, anything that saves chain space isn't really useful when no one wants chain space anyway, and there's no demand for it.
Yeah, but
which is the current
it's still an
situation.
efficiency improvement, which is welcome.
Yep.
Especially right now, I think we're gonna get more layer 2s coming to Bitcoin, and they're gonna be competing for block space. So making it more efficient.
Let's hope.
I'm not sure when Citrea is launching, maybe this month or next month or something, and then there's gonna be Alpen. But I did hear that if we have 3 of these CK rollups, then we're gonna end up having another scaling debate because the block space will get full.
We'll see. I'll believe it when I see it. I do think the design of most of these systems, Arc, BitVM, they're mostly designed for like happy path scenarios, and in the happy path scenarios for all of them, they don't consume that much block space. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I gotta plug a couple of ads, and then we can move on to. Actually, are we done with Papa swaps? Is there anything else to mention about them? Like, are they usable today? Did you complete the design, or is this just like a proof of concept?
But yeah, yes to both questions. It is a proof of concept. Technically, you can use it today. I made it so that it works on mainnet, and you could. I don't recommend that. It's experimental software, and you'll probably lose your money because I'm a bad coder. But I also presented it at Bitcoin Plus Plus, the most recent one in
Istanbul, I think.
Istanbul. Yeah, I presented them in Istanbul. And one of the guys there works on PeerSwap, which is one of the Submarine swap services. He thought highly enough of it that he was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to implement this as the new protocol for PeerSwaps. And I talked to Michael Boom. I think his name is Boomin from Boltz Exchange. He seemed less impressed.
Really? Michael Boomin is from Albi.
Oh, well, not him then. I think there's another Michael who's like the CEO of Boltz Exchange. I think he's a Michael. Sorry, Michael, if I forgot your name. But I talked to him about it. He seemed less impressed with it. But he said if wallets adopt it, then he would do it. So I made it. My proof of concept is a wallet. It works like Moon Wallet, except it uses this new protocol. So it's cheaper than Moon Wallet. And yeah, that's we'll see if wallets adopt it. Then I think exchanges and such things and Loop and the other things will adopt it too. Although Lightning Loop, they have their own mechanism for doing submarine swaps more efficiently. They also have their own single transaction protocol, and so they probably wouldn't adopt mine. They're probably just eventually going to implement their own protocol for doing single transaction submarine swaps, and that will be that. Then they'll be doing that as well, but just a different way. So that's some stuff. Let's see. Are there any questions on YouTube? No, but we do have João Cahocuil. Sounds Portuguese. Hi, João. He just says all is super, and he gives a thumbs up and a crown emoji. So, hi, good to see you. Thanks for watching the show. Let us know if you have any questions. And let's see. Are there any questions about Hedgehog on Nostr? I have new notifications. Let's see. No, I have a retweet. And let's see on Twitter. I have new notifications. Let's see if any of them are about this. No, I don't see any about this. So I think we're good. I think that is what the things we want to talk about relative to Papa swaps.
Okay.
Unless you have something.
I do have something. Like, you're such a big fan of Phoenix Wallet, and I guess also Breeze is pretty close in terms of design, even though they're not close. They're similar in UX, but very different in how they work in the background. But basically, are any of these willing to implement your Papa swaps or your Hedgehog, or did they show any interest? Because you're such a big fan, you're basically using Phoenix every day, and you sort of optimize your development so that they could improve on your experience using this service. And did they actually show any interest in integrating your work?
I haven't talked to the Phoenix people about it. I don't know. I do. I am in frequent communication with Evan Kaludis from Zeus Wallet. He's like invited me into his Telegram channel and his I forget what this app is called. Some other chat app he uses, and he likes all my stuff. But yeah, I showed it to him. It did like a demo, and he hasn't said he's going to integrate it into the wallet. So I don't know. If you want to see it in more wallets, demand it. Post on their Twitters and say, hey, guys should implement Papa Swaps. Take a look at Super's protocol. And nagging is a great way to get things done in stuff like this. Or they'll find out that there's something wrong with it and then not do it. In which case, that's also useful information. Then I can stop talking about it.
So I did some research in the background about Boltz, to be sure. So their CEO, his name is Kilian Rausch.
Mhm.
And there's a Michael who is the main coder. He's like a pseudonymous co-founder. And
Okay.
he did not list his last name. So he is a Michael. We don't know what his last name is, but he's not Michael Booman, who is the CEO of Albi. And before that, he was working on something like the Lightning MetaMask. What was it called? I actually remember using it.
It was created. I thought that one was created by James O'Byrne. Let me look it up. What Lightning extension was created by James O'Byrne? I wonder if I doubt that the AI will know how to answer this, but we'll find out.
I've used Grok to do this research very fast in the background. Anyway, until we find
Joule.
out the answer, let me
Joule
plug
was the name of the extension.
Joule. Yeah, that
Joule.
one. Yeah. Joule.
AI's got you covered.
I remember that. I had it installed on my Firefox and it worked beautifully for a while. 2018 or something.
As long as you had a node to connect it to. I remember that being an issue with Joule.
Yeah, but it was so nice while it lasted. And I
Mhm.
also remembered Bottle Pay. That one was majestic.
Ooh, I don't remember Bottle Pay very well. I think that was a custodial
It
extension
was.
as well.
But
Yeah.
what it enabled you to do was basically to tip any creator across any platform as long as they had this one browser plugin. And they also had a Twitter bot, so you could basically transfer a small amount of Bitcoin to someone on Twitter just because you liked their post or something. Like, this was so beautiful in
That's
terms
really
of
cool.
UX. I
Hey,
haven't seen
NWC
anything like it.
devs, if any NWC devs, Nostr Wallet Connect devs are watching this, recreate that using Nostr Wallet Connect. That sounds like it'd be really easy to do, and it would be really cool again to have that. So go for it.
Yeah, I remember writing about this for Bitcoin Magazine at the time. And it was around the time when there was something like COPPA or whatever that was going to get a lot of creators demonetized on YouTube. Because if they feature video games or something that was considered to be kids' content, then
Mhm.
they would get demonetized. And it was a big deal at the time. Yeah.
Yeah, censorship on social media is often discussed in Bitcoin circles. Bitcoin helps with this, and I guess it helps with deplatforming more so than censorship of your. Or it helps with monetary deplatforming when things like Visa and PayPal deplatform you. I guess it doesn't really help if like Twitter or YouTube deplatforms you. Bitcoin doesn't fix that, but there you go. At least it makes it so that you don't lose all your money. That's nice.
Yeah, someone SmartMark23 on Twitter says that ChangeTip used to be available on Twitter for this. And there was also tipin.me, which was a very interesting tipping service. If you enjoyed someone's content, you could tip them directly, but it wasn't tipping for a post. Like, it wasn't obvious for what you tipped them. It was just that you liked their account.
Yeah. But BottlePay let you specify a thing that you were tipping them for.
Yeah,
I
you could
suppose you could
write
do
this
that
as
with
a
just
comment,
generic.
like just like you tag Grok
Yeah.
right now and you ask him if it's true, what's being mentioned in the OP. You could basically tag Bottle Pay, and there was this automation in the background that you could say what you want to send, and you could even denominate in any fiat currency. And you could see that there was a guy, Boss, I think, Baas. He's from Norway or something, and he was sending me Russian rubles. And every time he was
And you
sending me Russian rubles, I would post a GIF of a Russian doing that Russian dance.
So I'm a fan of this kind of spam. If you're spamming like a layer 2 system, or this would just be some guy's database, more power to you. As long as all the parties are consensual, I'm a big fan. Speaking of spam, perhaps we could use this opportunity to transition to the next topic, which is BIP 444.
Oh yeah, but let me plug my ads first because I'm
Okay,
gonna
cool.
get murdered. Anyway, Layer 2 Labs. Go to layer2labs.com/download to find the latest version of the Drivechains which run on the Bitcoin Signet. And they have a sidechain for Zcash, they have a sidechain for Ethereum, something for assets as in Namecoin, and also a big block version of Bitcoin which they call Thunder, very controversially, may I say. And it's basically a prunable version of the Bitcoin protocol with very large blocks optimized for high throughput. Basically, Layer 2 Labs is trying to bring all the interesting use cases from altcoins to Bitcoin on sidechains which are enforced by miners. And they did not give up on the two-way peg. They are very optimistic about a lot of stuff. And they rely on game theory, just like Bitcoin does in terms of preventing double spends, because it's not cryptographically enforced or whatever. It's just incentives which play out against actually doing that. And it can be a very fun weekend project. Like, you download the software, you go to the Drivechains Talk Telegram channel, and you ask people to send you some coins, and then you send back and forth, and you understand how the tech works, how you can swap coins from one layer to the other. It's very interesting. Give it a try. I highly recommend it. And I think maybe Litecoin is going to try it this year or next year so that we can see how this works. And hopefully we'll get this on Bitcoin one day. But once again, we're going to get to BIP 444, and that's what makes me very pessimistic about actually improving Bitcoin. And then there's also Sideshift, which is the place where you can swap. Usually, I recommend people to swap their stable coins for BTC because, first of all, we're still in a bull market, and it's a bad idea to hold on to stable coins. And secondly, stable coins are not censorship resistant, and you never know when you receive quote unquote bad coins, bad USDT or USDC from someone, and it's gonna get banned or sanctioned or whatever. So it's better to just swap it immediately for something that cannot be taken away from you, which is Bitcoin. What you can do basically is to never touch the stable coin. So you put your BTC address into Sideshift, you click the shift button after you pick the USD whatever to BTC pair, and basically you send the USD address to the person wanting to pay in stable coins, and then once they send the transaction, you get BTC to your wallet. And it's very beautiful. Also works with Liquid if you're into that. They were the first exchange to support Lightning and also the first big one to give up on it, like a couple of years ago. Check it out. The URL is sideshift.io. No, .ai. So sorry, sideshift.ai. I messed up there.
Sideshift.ai.
Doesn't work in the US, I think.
Oh, well, let me check. We'll go visit their website and see. I use stuff like that all the time, and sometimes I have to like open up Tor to use them because they're like, oh, it doesn't work in your country. That one looks like it works. Oh, no, Sideshift. Oh, it's .us is their US thing, and it says it's not yet available in my state.
No, don't use US. I think it's a scam.
Okay, well, their website.
AI.
Their website redirected me from AI to US and then said,
Oh, I understand.
this isn't available in your state anyway. So apparently,
okay, so maybe they have a different
rollout.
landing page for the US.
And it doesn't work in Ohio anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there are ways. You mentioned one. You can use Tor or whatever.
Yeah.
If you really want
to pretend to be somewhere else.
I mean,
okay.
You're on the internet. You're not technically in any place. You're just accessing data.
Okay. So let me go check again, see if there are any more questions about Papa Swaps. Let's see. I see things on Twitter. We have a question that says, "This is my weakest area of understanding." Oh, that's replying to something else. That's actually replying about our next topic, which is BIP 444. I'm having a conversation right now on Twitter about BIP 444. And let's see on Nostr. Any questions about this? Not that I see. No new questions. And on YouTube, just the one comment that just said hi. Well, it said all is super. Hi, Zhao. Great. Let's move on to. Do you want to move on to BIP 4 now?
Oh yeah, let's go.
It's too many fours. They should make it like BIP4 or something. Single digit numbers. It should have all the BIPs be single digit numbers. That would help. Couldn't possibly cause any confusion.
So Super, I do recall that you're one of the advocates for using filters on your node, and you said that they work.
Yep, they do. One of the things that I have been on about recently is highlighting that they have positive benefits for your node, for your personal node. So, for example, I made a website recently called Spam Tester. Sorry, I say it's a website. It's just a GitHub page. So if you go to my GitHub and look for Spam Tester, you can click the button and try it out. And this finds the most recently created filtered transaction that the transaction that was filtered by not mempools but allowed into Bitcoin Core mempools, and shows the different bandwidth consumption on both devices. So filtered transactions on NOTS nodes are not relayed around the network, and so they don't consume bandwidth from relay. They only consume bandwidth from being downloaded, and as a result, Bitcoin NOTS nodes use objectively less bandwidth than a Bitcoin Core node when it comes to spam transactions. So I like to highlight that there is an objective technical difference between, or there's an objective technical benefit from treating spam differently from other transactions, which is that nodes that do this use less bandwidth. And yeah, so they work. They improve your node, and that is one of the reasons why I think filters are good. Spam filters work.
Okay, but they don't work in terms of actually stopping the content that you don't like, because all it takes is just one mining node that's gonna pick them up and broadcast and store everything on your node anyway once you download the blocks.
They don't completely stop spam from getting into blocks, and if a miner really wants to do it, then they can do it, but there's a risk, which is that another effect that spam filters have is that they slow down the compact block relay for blocks that contain filtered transactions. And thus, as more transactions are filtered, as more nodes filter them, rather, if you get to, say, 50% of the network filtering them, those blocks that contain widely filtered transactions start taking longer to propagate around the network, like noticeably longer. And in stale block races, where there's two competing blocks, the one with fewer widely filtered transactions is more likely to win such a race. That is bad, especially for small miners to mine widely filtered transactions. And so I think that if they were widely used, which they're not widely used, but if the spam filters were widely used, they could also incentivize more miners, especially small ones, not to include spam in blocks, because it would increase their orphan rate, or their stale block rate. So there's that as well, but I don't think that benefit it doesn't apply when they're only used by like 20% of people, which is the current situation. So then the benefit that I like to talk about instead is that, or in addition to that, is that they actually have an objective technical benefit on just your own personal device and its bandwidth consumption. And I think that's good enough. Even if they didn't stop spam from getting into the network at all, like create a situation where more people are using this, even if they didn't do that, it would still be good to run them on your personal device, just to reduce its unnecessary bandwidth usage.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think your assumption, even if you had 50% plus of nodes filtering, your assumption is that mining nodes are objective, or they don't arbitrarily pick transactions and they just treat the mempool as something which is universal or whatever. But you did have cases of rearranging the order from the mempool and basically mining pools just mining whatever they want, because I guess at this point mining fees that they collect are not significant enough for them to care, and they just do something like, I remember there was basically they optimized for mempool.space so that they can draw various ASCII or ASCII, how do you pronounce it, ASCII images.
Like I usually hear it pronounced ASCII.
there was a Trump one. There was, I don't know. There were lots of these silly attempts to show that miners can actually rearrange the mempool so that they mine whatever they want, not necessarily what we have on our nodes.
So yeah, Portland Hodl wrote this software that I guess he like reverse engineered, or he probably just looked at the code base for Mempool Space because it's free and open source, and looked at how they color the individual transactions inside their block explorer, because they have something called goggles where you can view the transactions and they color code them according to various different transaction types Bitcoin supports. So they figured out what the color scheme was, and then Portland Hodl is a Bitcoin developer. He made software that lets you, if you're a miner, create a block that has the transactions ordered in such a way that it paints a picture using mempool.space's color coding thing. And what I was told recently by someone who works at Mara is that other mining pools who didn't have this software were paying Mara to paint blocks for them. This is that they could say we're doing it too, even though they didn't have the software, which I think great marketing move by Mara to get other mining pools to pay you to use your software. That's pretty cool. Not a fan of painting blocks using Mempool Space's proprietary API. I think that's a stupid thing to do, but it's pretty cool that Portland wrote that software and then they got other mining pools to pay them to use it. If that really happened. So
there is
cool
someone
stuff.
in the chat named SmartMark23 on Twitter, and he says there isn't such a thing as spam on the Bitcoin network because spam equals other people's transactions, and this is supposed to be permissionless, so transactions literally cannot be spam.
Well, you and I have different definitions of spam then. I make a distinction between transactions that embed transactions that embed data that is not required for spending a UTXO for shifting value from UTXO A to UTXO B. If you don't do that in like as efficient a way as possible, and instead also put a bunch of data in your transaction that's like a picture or something, I consider the extra data spam. And yeah, so but I have a definition of spam in which it does exist, and that's the one that I use. And I think my definition has objective technical benefits, because if you use my definition and encode it in software, then your node uses less bandwidth. So great. One side just has opinions and the other side has objective technical implementations and specifications that make a real world difference. I recommend being more objective about this issue.
Isn't this unfortunate that we got to this point where everything is relative, like we can't even agree about what words mean, and therefore we can't make any meaningful progress, and we just talk past each other, especially on Twitter. People disagree about what a soft fork is, they disagree about what spam means, they disagree about all sorts of definitions of words. And the problem is not that they don't make sense. The problem is that they understand something else when someone else talks to them and disagrees.
That is a drawback. There are positives and negatives to having different definitions for the same words. A positive is that it reduces the size of dictionaries, I suppose. If you can put more entries on the same line, more definitions on the same line, that saves space in dictionaries. But a negative is that sometimes when people are discussing things, one person will mean subtly different thing A, and another person will mean subtly different thing B by the same term. And that's a drawback, because then you often don't notice the differences and start talking past each other until someone says, I think you guys have different definitions of your terms. So yeah, there are drawbacks to it. It's also useful, I think, to have different definitions of things for different contexts. What's an example of this? I think the term transaction in a Bitcoin context comes from not where you might expect it to. We refer to transactions in Bitcoin referring to the way they're used in databases. In database design, the term transaction means like the act of inserting or deleting data from a database. And in Bitcoin, we define the blockchain as our database, and we define a transaction as adding an entry to it. But because it's a financial thing, one might easily assume that the word transaction comes from the world of finance, where a transaction means a different thing, and it's like an interaction between two parties for a monetary exchange of goods. And I think that's an example where the subtly different meanings of terms collide, because Bitcoin is both a database system and a financial system. And so that's like, what are you using the word transaction to mean here? Are you meaning a financial interaction, or are you meaning a database entry? And that perhaps that has contributed to some of the misunderstandings in the spam debate as well.
Also, remember when I met you
Or
2 years ago that you told me that since you discovered BitVM, you really wanted to play Pokemon. I guess it's the original Red and Blue, and you wanted to catch Pikachu using the Bitcoin network.
I thought it would be fun to,
But by today's
yeah.
standards, would that be spam?
No, because the design of BitVM is such that in the happy path, the transactions don't go on the blockchain. So that is one of the things that thrills me about BitVM, is that from the beginning, its design has been you keep the junk stuff off the blockchain and only put the financial part on the blockchain. Like if the contract is I pay you $10 if you catch Pikachu, in the real world, or without BitVM, I don't know a way to do that without trust. Without trust between the two counterparties, where it's just like, look, here's the picture of me catching Pikachu, and now send me the $10, and you like hope that I do that. Or we put like an escrow and then hope the escrow is honest. With BitVM, you can actually encode the rules of Pokemon, the script of the video game itself in the BitVM paradigm, play it off chain, and still have it so that if the party who's supposed to catch the Pokemon actually catches it, then he can take the money and only put the financial part where the money gets transferred. That's the only part that goes on the blockchain in the cooperative path. And to me, that's the ideal scenario, that to design systems where the junk that Bitcoin nodes shouldn't, or that I don't think most Bitcoin nodes care about, i.e. playing Pokemon, you keep that off chain, and then you only put the financial part, which is the actual monetary transfer, on chain. And so that is the way I perceive BitVM to be designed, short of modifications by some of the BitVM teams, Citrea. Short of that, I think BitVM is a well-designed system and does what I ideally think layer 2 systems should do.
Okay, but you mentioned Citrea. It's also using, I think, BitVM version 2, and I think Alpen will be using version 3 with Glock, which is their garbled circuits. But basically, both of them will be using Bitcoin, as in the base layer, as a data availability layer. So they'll put zero knowledge proofs, which correspond to activity on their layer 2, on the Bitcoin base layer.
I'll have to see that. It sounds like it, but I'll have to see it, and I haven't looked into the. Generally, I oppose the idea of using Bitcoin as a data availability scheme for non-Bitcoin data. But I'll have to see. I could be convinced that that the data they're putting on here, like if they said I could imagine a scenario where someone says and convinces me of something like, the transactions that we're putting on Bitcoin are Bitcoin transactions, but they're valid UTXO spends and such, but they are compressed in such a way that they take up less space. I could imagine someone saying something like that, and I'd be like, convinced that that is what Bitcoin nodes are for. I don't know what the Citrea people are planning to do yet, because I haven't read all of their papers. The stuff that I have seen them do is like dumping stuff into opportunities that, me, I can think of several different ways of doing that without dumping data into opportunities. So yeah, but we'll see. I want to read their full papers and see their implementation before I make a final judgment call about whether roll-up data is spam or not.
I think that Citrea sort of received the best and the worst marketing ever. And honestly, I think it's good that they were so much in the spotlight, because they did not have to pay for it. They just got this advertisement for free and everyone spoke about them. And they were used like a reason for the aperture size to get increased so that they can use the Bitcoin blockchain as a data availability layer in a more efficient way. But the funny part is that they're actually not. So in the design that there's gonna get launched on the mainnet, they're not gonna use aperture. They're gonna inscribe data just the normal way because that's the software that got audited and seems fine. And if they waited for them to so basically, if they waited for Bitcoin Core V30, they would have to wait for another 6 months to get another audit for this to happen. So in the first iteration, Citrea will actually use inscriptions.
That sounds like an improvement. I'm also not a fan of inscriptions, and I would like to see them eliminated. But they are, if the comparison is strictly between we're going to put the data in fake public keys or we're going to put the data in inscriptions do less damage, and so that's a positive thing. So there's a phrase.
So why do you say that upper turn does damage? Because it's regarded as something that you can actually prune, and it was designed as such. Like, this is the purpose, to put the data that you don't want to have permanent.
I believe I said fake public keys do the damage. That's what I was trying to say. Was fake public keys do the damage. Opportunes also cause some amount of damage in that, at least for nodes that don't prune the blockchain, the opportune sticks around forever. So it gets pruned from the UTXO set, but not from the blockchain. So if you don't have a pruned blockchain, you keep that data forever, and that's bad. Or at least I think it's bad to keep that data around forever when it's not of the class of things that I consider monetary data. But that's also true of inscriptions. Inscriptions also don't get pruned from the blockchain unless you prune your blockchain. So it's a wash in terms of the comparison of opportunes versus inscriptions. So yeah, I don't think no, I guess opportunes are worse anyway in one respect, which is opportunes take up more of what's called base space. Actually, I'm not sure that this is a widely adopted term. In Bitcoin, we used to have, before the SegWit upgrade, there was one space where all transaction data went into, and it didn't really have a name other than the blockchain. That was the place where all data went into. After the SegWit upgrade, we had like this separate data structure where there's witness data and the rest of data. And some people, including me, have started calling that the rest of it base space, which is where data went before SegWit, or just the regular blockchain without the SegWit part is base space. And opportunes take up more base space than inscriptions do. And thus, in a certain sense, they're worse because that's the more, there's more witness space. SegWit increased the size of the blockchain by 4. We made it go from 1 megabytes to 4 megabytes, but 3 of those megabytes are witness space. So it's like a less scarce resource, and base space is more scarce, and opportunes take up that space. So if it was a strict comparison between opportunes and inscriptions, I would also say it's an improvement if they put the garbage data in inscriptions versus opportunes, because then they're consuming a less scarce resource. However, I oppose both. I think putting non-monetary data in inscriptions, opportunes, or fake pub keys are all bad ideas, and I want to filter them. And even use BIP 444 to prohibit them entirely and make them invalid according to consensus rules. So that is hopefully forthcoming, although I doubt it. I don't think BIP 444 is going to go anywhere. But perhaps it is time to talk about that.
Yeah, but before we get to that, I was going to ask, don't you think it's sort of a legally slippery slope in the sense that once you do prove to your government that you can do, in fact, make Bitcoin not permissionless, you're going to get your government stepping in and saying, well, since you're filtering JPEGs, why don't you put up this OFAC sanction list? Or why don't you block transactions coming from North Korean IPs? Or why don't you do this and this and this? And if you refuse to do it, they're going to be like, well, you're already blocking something that we don't really think is illegal, like silly JPEGs. So why do you refuse to block something that's illegal? And that's what gets us into a sort of hell where it's going to become more difficult to use Bitcoin.
I don't think this soft fork BIP 444 materially increases our slide down that slope, and or I guess reduces our height on that slope. And one of the reasons I think that is not true or doesn't do that is that we already do in Bitcoin block certain transactions from going through, namely invalid ones. The consensus rules already block invalid transactions. And so the government could already come through and say, well, you've proven that you can censor stuff. You censor all the things that you've soft forked out of Bitcoin. So why not add our OFAC censorship list to your nodes as well and just say that's a new consensus rule?
Sure, but
They
that
can
was
already
a
do
rather
that.
technical voluntary choice, and I could point out that maybe less than 10% of nodes were doing this. Like it was an actual deliberate choice that you were making. Now you actually have an implementation that you just download from the internet, and you don't have to know anything, and it's gonna filter stuff for you. And I do think that ocean mining and Bitcoin knots are gonna end up. They're already sending legal letters to other mining pools from the US, so I do think that they're gonna end up getting regulated to the point that they receive a long list from Chainalysis or whatever that's gonna get updated with all, for example, addresses of coins that were stolen from exchanges, with addresses that come from North Korea or Iran or something.
Yeah, I don't understand what you were saying a minute ago, which was that they won't send such a list because previous soft forks were voluntary. It sounded like that's what you were saying, but I
No,
don't think that's
not
what you
soft
meant.
forks. What I mean is that if you actually implemented this kind of policy on your node, it was deliberate, it was your choice, and it was not something that was basically commodified to the point where you just download the software. So maybe it was not a popular choice, and the narrative that Bitcoin is permissionless was much more powerful than this minority of people who were choosing to use the blacklist on their node. There's actually a blacklist file that you find in Bitcoin Core when you download it.
You mean
Most
Bitcoin knots?
most nodes, no, it's also on Bitcoin Core, which Bitcoin Knots is just a fork of it.
Really? I didn't. You are you saying that currently there is a blacklist in Bitcoin Core?
There was always one. I mean,
Oh, I'd like
it's
to see
something
it.
that you can basically fill by yourself. It's not. It doesn't come prepackaged with any list. It's just something that
Okay.
you can complete if you want to.
If someone could find that and give a link to me, I don't think such a thing exists, and I would love to be proven wrong.
I
So
remember it was a big conversation at one point because there was a woke core developer. I don't remember exactly which one, who wanted to change the name of the blacklist into the block list because he thought blacklist sounds racist.
okay, well,
Let me look it up.
I'm hoping that someone can find this file and send it to me, and I hereby attest that if such a thing exists, I will look foolish. Do you second that?
No,
No? Oh, okay. He doesn't think I'll look foolish if such a thing exists.
it's fine to
But
not know
I
stuff.
say, yep, cool. Well, that is
I'm
one
also here
way
to
that
learn. I'm not here to dunk on anyone. It's just that I find it strange that we are switching narratives this easily and we're going down a slippery slope without. So there's this quest for purity, which I do understand and I can sympathize with it, but I can also see how this is gonna end up causing a lot of damage to the project. And I think the only way in which we can actually save Bitcoin at this point in the community is to add some sort of base layer privacy so that we can't look anymore to say that this transaction is fine and this one is not. The system becomes more censorship resistant because you can't discriminate. And yeah, the miners also pick up transactions without actually caring where they come from and what happened there.
so if BIP 444 goes well, if BIP 444 gets adopted into Bitcoin knots, I don't think it's gonna go anywhere anyway. I think it is. I think there are more Bitcoiners who I think there are more Bitcoiners who strongly oppose it than there are who are strongly in favor of it. So let's to put some numbers on it. I think there's roughly around 20% of Bitcoin node runners are interested enough in stopping spam or reducing its negative impact that they decided to switch over to knots. And I don't think most of them are on board with this BIP 444 proposal. So if it gets on into knots, I think maybe 10% of them will adopt the new BIP 444 compatible version of knots, and so then 10% of the network, of the total network, will be using BIP 444, and 90% will not. That's my suspicion. And then I think among the remaining 90% who are not using it, I think something like 25% of them are going to be so opposed to it that they will actually download incompatible software. Like some people call it user rejected soft fork. They'll download something that says, if miners start or any miner who starts enforcing the BIP 444 rules, we're going to invalidate their blocks. Like Ocean blocks, for example. If Ocean starts enforcing this, they'll like invalidate Ocean blocks. I think that's a more likely possibility, because I think I suspect the Bitcoiners are going to strongly oppose BIP 444. Personally, though, I think that except for its deployment method, the outside of the deployment method, the specific thing it wants to do, which is temporarily invalidate certain types of scripts and oversized data thing, or large data carrying things, I think those are good ideas, and I would like to see those invalidated as well. So I guess we will find out, but I think it's a dead in the water and it's not gonna go anywhere. Might result in Ocean losing hash rate, but that's about the best I can think it would accomplish.
Right. I think it's useful
most.
for the purpose of our conversation to also define what is BIP 444, because we dived straight into it.
Mm-hmm.
Is dived irregular or regular as a verb? We dove, I think, is the correct way.
Dove is the word that I would expect, although I think there is a form of the word where you can say dived. There might be a different word.
We dove straight into it without actually explaining to the audience. I mean, of course, most people know because they spend a lot of time on Twitter, but maybe some people listening to this have been away for a week or something, and they don't know what BIP 444 is about.
Yeah, its title, so its number is BIP 444, and that is the easy thing to call it because the title is rather unwieldy. Its title, I think, is Temporary Prohibition of something. Now I have to look it up because I forget. BIP 444, full text. Yeah, so what it does is it identifies certain transaction types that are currently commonly used for spam. Among them are the witness structure, or the annex rather, not the witness structure, but the annex in the Bitcoin transactions. It identifies the taproot Merkle tree as one of the things that it's going to limit the size of that. It wants to change it from, I think, 4 kilobytes is something like the current limit, and it wants to change it to 257 bytes total. It wants to limit the size of op-returns so that those can only be 83 bytes, I think. But yeah, it takes a bunch of stuff where you can shove data in Bitcoin. Inscription envelopes is another. It makes it so inscriptions are invalid, at least according to their current specification. It tries to take all these things where people put data in Bitcoin transactions and make them actually invalid, so that if a miner mines such a transaction that does that, his block wouldn't count. Bitcoin nodes that adopt this soft fork would reject them and just consider them invalid blocks and not part of the blockchain. So that is the proposal, and I'm looking for its name. A second, it's hard. I'm having trouble finding its text. Let's see if I can find a link to it.
I was muted. Yeah. In the meantime, I also found an explanation from Adam Borko, who said that the blacklist file on your Bitcoin Core node is a ban list for nodes, not addresses, as in ban list for IP addresses.
Right. Yeah. So not Bitcoin addresses, but you can ban nodes and say, I was talking to, I think it's Beef for Bacon. His name is Nate on Twitter recently, and he highlighted that he is running a script that bans all NOTS nodes, or at least nodes that self-identify as NOTS nodes. His node is running a script that looks for those on the network and then adds them to his ban list. That doesn't affect what Bitcoin transactions they can receive, because it doesn't have anything to do with Bitcoin addresses, but rather just the IP addresses of nodes that you don't want to connect to, don't want to peer with. And so he banned all NOTS nodes. And some NOTS nodes ban some core nodes, I suppose. I'm not aware of anyone doing that, but I suppose someone might be. So yeah, you can do that, but that is not a transaction or address blacklist as far as Bitcoin addresses go. The name is Reduced Data Temporary Soft Fork. That is the name of the soft fork. And yeah, it's got a number of fields that it tries to look for and block data from block non-financial data from being in them. And if this would load, I would tell you what those fields are. There are 7 of them. They are output script pub keys. Currently, they can be large sizes, and this reduces them to be only 34 bytes a piece, and that prevents you from storing data larger than 34 bytes in an output script. Although you could just use a bunch of them, which is how the stamps protocol works anyways. Then it does push data. The push data function in Bitcoin script allows you to do what it says, which is push data to the stack. And it restricts that, so it can only push payloads of 256 bytes or less, with some exceptions, which it goes over. It prohibits undefined witness versions and Taproot versions. So both the SegWit upgrade and the witness and the Taproot upgrade created new things called upgrade hooks, which if you use them in a Bitcoin script, or in a Bitcoin output script, well, yeah, that's still a Bitcoin script. If you use them in Bitcoin script, then they're undefined behavior, and Bitcoin knows just kind of ignore those any data you put there. So this makes it so that you can't do that until they're defined. Then they would they'd have to be defined after the soft fork ends, because the soft fork is only valid for, I think, 1 year is the proposal. And anyway, yeah, I don't know if I need to go through all of them, but they're just different places where you can put data in Bitcoin transactions. It tries to find them and make them invalid if they have more than a certain amount of data in them. And that is the proposal. And to have it only last for a year, so that after a year, you'd be able to do it again. You'd be able to put data in those things.
Okay, so why do you think this is controversial and it's not gonna work?
It seems to me that most Bitcoiners seem to have, since about the year 2023, Bitcoiners have been tolerant of spam on the network, and increasingly since that time, supportive, not just tolerant, but actually think it's a good thing for it to be on there. So you often hear people, or I often hear people say things like, spam pays the miners, and it's good for the miners to get paid. It doesn't hurt my node. I'll be storing, I agreed to 4 megabyte blocks, and as long as they stay under 4 megabytes, I'm happy. So more power to them. If someone wants to pay the miners with, spam transactions, or what I call spam transactions, more power to them. And I think it seems to me that most Bitcoiners are either in the camp where they're willing to tolerate it, or in the camp where they are actually supportive of it. And so as a result, a soft fork that tries to eliminate something that most Bitcoiners don't care about or actively support, I think they'll not like that and will try to block the soft fork. So that's my expectation.
Right, but let me put my Taproot Wizard's hat on, which I don't have because I'm not cool enough. But they would say that these inscriptions and these stamps and whatever, they can be used as anchors into other second layers or protocols that build on top of Bitcoin. Like, are these also spam? Is this fine to use inscriptions as a way to onboard people to something which does use BTC and does pay transactions to the Bitcoin miners? Transaction fees to the Bitcoin miners, but are maybe including different features and trade-offs?
I'm unwilling to make a blanket statement and say all such designs must necessarily be spam, but I do suspect it. I suspect that any design that requires you to put non-financial data on Bitcoin is probably a spam protocol. There's probably a way to do that. Like if it's legitimate monetary or non-spam transactions, not just non-Bitcoin data, I think there's probably a more efficient way to do it without dumping arbitrary data on Bitcoin. But I'm unwilling, without looking at specific proposals, to just make a blanket statement and say definitely they are all spam. My starting suspicion is any such proposal is probably spam. But yeah, I would have to take a look and see an individual proposal and see what I think about that specific one.
Okay, I do want to ask you why increasing the upper turn size was such a big deal and caused so much drama. I tried to participate in the beginning and say that it's not such big of a deal like people pretend it is, and I do still run Bitcoin Core V30. Like, I haven't had any problem. But it seems like there's a camp that pretends that only pedophiles use it or something, and it's sort of crazy that we ended up at this point.
I'm not aware of any pedophiles who use that field, so not to my knowledge. I think it's, in general, it's bad that Bitcoin has this, what I think is a flaw, which is that there are fields in Bitcoin where you can add arbitrary data and they're widely unfiltered, or that arbitrary data is widely unfiltered. I think of that as a flaw. And when Bitcoin Core V30 came out, it added another one. Instead of like patching the existing ones, it removed the filter on large opereturns and made it so there's another place to put arbitrary data. Also, the specific place that it made it possible to put it in is opereturns, and those are more harmful than other ones because they use more of the precious base space instead of like subscriptions do, using the less precious witness space for that data. So they cost more. The place where they want people to put data, or not want people, the place where they opened up it made it easier for people to put data, also makes it so that it's more harmful data because it uses more precious block space. So yeah, I think that's a bad decision, and I also think that there's an objective benefit of running the filters, which is this, apart from the fact that if widely used, then I think they incentivize miners not to mine such transactions at all. Apart from that, they also decrease the negative impact of spam on your node by reducing the bandwidth consumption of relaying those spam transactions. Because if you filter them, then your node doesn't, Bitcoin Core and Bitcoin Knots both don't relay filtered transactions. They either put them in something called the extra pool, which transactions in the extra pool are not relayed, or for some of them, they reject them altogether from the node and refuse to have them in the mempool or the extra pool or any other place except the blockchain. And so not having them in any of those non-blockchain places reduces the amount of bandwidth your node consumes. So I think there's objective technical benefits to using filters. A, reduces your bandwidth consumption for spam transactions. B, if widely used, it disincentivizes miners from including them in blocks. But yeah, that is not the current situation. Instead of doing what I want, the Bitcoin Core developers want something else, and so they did something else. And if you agree with them, run Bitcoin Core V30. I'm happy to help you. I'm happy to help you set it up. Just because someone disagrees with my opinion doesn't mean I think you're a bad person. I'm happy to help people do things that are contrary to my opinions. But also, if you agree with me, then you can run software that does block those things. And Knots does a better job of it than Bitcoin Core does, from what I can see. So consider Knots.
I do have to say at this point that I wish more of the conversation happened like this, like, way where you respect the other side and you agree to disagree, as opposed to just using labels or blaming each other of something or having some sort of insults that eventually led to this label of the pleb slop, which basically every time someone makes an argument which is considered to be maybe incorrect from a technical point of view or just irrelevant for the context, it's pleb slop. And it seems like both sides of this debate have labels for each other. The Nazi people are Nazis. The others like Core
Courtards,
Courtards, exactly. Like I've seen
communists.
Nick
I've heard
Szabo
it
use
as a
this, and I'm
term.
so disappointed. This guy used to be like the one who was helping us understand and find consensus. He's a
I
different
don't.
person than he was during the block size wars.
I oppose the use of insults as substitutes for arguments, as well as insulting in general. I think is a bad idea. I do make an exception if it is teasing. If someone uses an insult as a way to tease someone and they don't mean it in bad faith, then I think it's acceptable to do that. And I think, at least when I first heard the term Nazis, KN with a K, used to describe my camp, I thought it was good-natured teasing, and I still think most of the people who use it mean it that way. They don't actually like think we're Nazis. I don't think anyone on that side thinks we're Nazis, or at least none of the serious people. I think that it's a teasing name, and so I don't mind such a thing when used for that purpose as good-natured fun. But yeah, if it is being used as a substitute for an argument and to say like you don't have to listen to him because he's a Nazi with a K, that is a fallacy called ad hominem, and yeah, don't commit fallacies. It makes your arguments look bad and be bad. It is a bad argument. That is no merit. So don't do it.
Yeah, I agree. There's also someone in the chat who says, where do I start? Okay. So do you want me to use your coin or not? If you want me to use your coin, then don't tell me what I should be using it for. It's none of your business. It's not like you don't have an army of competition out there to eat your lunch. So seriously, you want my money or not?
I I don't think this gentleman is paying me. So let me try and phrase it. I hope I'm not making a straw man here by converting it into an argument that I understand better. But I'm going to answer an argument that I understand better, and hopefully it has some overlap with the argument of the gentleman who I'm responding to. So I have heard someone say that spam is good, because, or at least you should be neutral about it because it pays a fee. Spam pays a fee just like your transactions pay a fee, and as long as it's paying a fee, who cares? Who cares what it's doing? And my response to that argument, which I hope has some overlap with the argument this gentleman is making, my response to that argument is I don't get that fee. If I was running a general purpose storage system and received payment for people storing stuff on my server, then I think that argument has more merit. Like, what do you care what this content is that you're storing, that I'm storing on my server? If you're taking payment for it, you shouldn't care. That is an argument. Well, I would have a different response to an argument if that's what I was doing. But I have a reason for running a Bitcoin node, and it is that I want to see Bitcoin become the money of the world. And spam does not, I don't think, help it do that. In fact, I think spam hinders the ability of Bitcoin to become the world's money. And so especially when I don't see the fee that you're paying, rather miners get that fee and then store the data on my server. That's a different situation, and I don't think it is reasonable to ask me to store your data because you paid someone else to put it there. I don't think that's reasonable. There's certain data that I want to store, which is monetary transactions, because those actually help Bitcoin become the world's money, and spam transactions, I think, hinder that. So yeah, I don't want to store them, and saying that you paid someone, therefore it's good, it would be a bad argument. Again, I don't think the person I'm responding to now makes that argument. But I don't understand your argument, so I'm responding to a different one that I do understand. So there you go. That has some words in common.
Yeah, so for the record, I am pro-choice, meaning that everyone can choose to have their own relay policy and storage policy for their nodes. But at the same time, when you create something which generates a universal policy for all nodes, and then you promote that without even letting the users have their own choices, like, do you want this type of transaction? Do you want that? It just has like a default for what's not allowed. I think that's not really fine, because maybe that they're against something but they like something else, and there's not really like a middle ground. And maybe that most users are not, this is the next argument, right? That they're not technical enough to make their own choices. and it's going to take a lot of effort to set the right node policy. And I'm not sure if either camp is going to compromise and say, well, how about we let you prune this or remove this or not relay this or whatever. I think both sides are a bit dogmatic right now about what they're doing. And none of them accepts that maybe that there is a subset of users that is maybe not technical enough to pursue and go all the way with all of their desires, or maybe that there's a subset of users that has no idea what's really going on and needs someone to explain to them what every type of filtering actually does.
So both knots and core have optional policies that have a default setting, but that is also user configurable. And one thing I think neither one does a really good job of is giving users the option to change those before they start the node. So I shouldn't say not giving them the option. I should say making it easy. So if someone wants a cool hackathon project, it would be cool to get to deploy or to create a deployment of Bitcoin Core or Bitcoin Knots or like a wizard where you choose one on the installation, and where the wizard also guides you through setting up your mempool policy so that you don't start the node until you've decided, do you want transactions that match this template or that template? Or what if they have inscription envelopes? Do you want to relay those? And then you could, to have little checkboxes and say, yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm not okay with that. I think that'd be a pretty cool hackathon project and might help people make better choices about what they want their node to do when they set it up. Because most people, I think, just run it and have the defaults and that's it. Another thing, though, is to create deployments that just have different defaults. Because I think that if you create a deployment of Bitcoin or a distribution, I said a deployment, I think the word I should have been using in the past paragraphs is distribution. If you create a distribution of Bitcoin that has a certain set of defaults and you give it a name that people can call it by and debate about, I think that's useful as a signaling mechanism. You can say things like, look, 1,000 downloads for the version that implements these filters, and that I think that stuff like that is useful as a signaling mechanism, so that people can like crowd around a certain distribution and say this one has settings that a lot of people like. So both of those would be cool hackathon projects. Make different distributions of Bitcoin and Core and Bitcoin Knots that have different policies, and also make like a wizard where you can, for people who understand this stuff at a more advanced level, they can go through and check off which policies they want in their mempool. That would be cool. So, I mentioned that I get like
By
7
wizard,
ideas
you mean
a day.
setup menu, not taproot wizard, right?
Yeah, I mean a setup wizard. Like I don't know if they still call this, but back in when I got into Windows computing, anytime you installed an app, most of them had something called a setup wizard that would guide you through the installation process and settings and configuration options. But Bitcoin Core doesn't seem to really have one, and neither does Knots. At least I don't think they do. I can't think of one, and it would be cool if they did, because at least have a distribution that does have one, so that people can people who are advanced users can say before it starts, these are the settings I want it to run it under. I mentioned that sometimes I mentioned that I get like 7 ideas a day. I think I've gotten 4 of them just talking to you, and yeah, so you see how this process has for people who are interested in how that works. It's stuff like this. I just talk to people, and things that they come up with and things that I come up with are interesting to me, and often I write them down and then work on them later. I recommend if you want a happy life, I recommend that. It's great.
Yeah, and you also sort of told me that you used Windows 98, I think. That's the one that had the wizards, or at least made them popular.
Maybe, yeah. I don't. When my dad got a computer many years ago, I used whatever version he had, and I think he started out with like Windows 3, because I think I remember having to go into the command line and boot up Windows, which I think Windows 95 at least did away with that, so it just boot straight into Windows. So I believe he had a version that was pre-Windows 95, and then through various upgrade cycles, at some point wizards became common, and I remember them.
Yeah, we have a lot of comments and a lot of questions. And
yeah,
before I get to them, let me present the last 2 ads of this episode, and then we can get to them. So Bitcoin.com News is the competition for basically where this guy works, who actually asked the question, Aaron van Wierdum. He's from Bitcoin Magazine. But what I do like about Bitcoin.com news is that they're not so centered around US politics, and they have a more balanced overview of what's happening around the world. And the difference between Bitcoin.com news and Coindesk is that Coindesk is more centered around institutions and banks and whoever is getting into the space, dumping a lot of fiat money. And I think there's like a sweet middle ground that's to be found in here, where you also find some news about gold and silver and other markets which are adjacent to Bitcoin. And I like it. It's no longer the website that tells you that Bitcoin Cash is faster and you should not be using BTC. Their logo is orange right now, so you can assume that it's safe from the kind of messaging that people hate, or what they used to describe as propaganda during the block size wars. Anyway, check it out. It changed a lot. It's not what you remember. And that's also why I promote them, because people still haven't recovered from the block size wars for some reason. The market has moved on, everyone has moved on, but some people are still stuck. They have their PTSD going on. And last but not least, there's no ones. If you know Ray Youssef, he's like this big, muscular, 6'4" WWE character who wants to save the world by enabling the global south to have access to permissionless, uncensorable, and unconfiscatable money. And No One's is his peer-to-peer marketplace where you can trade and basically give liquidity to people from Nigeria, the Middle East, and South America, who are primarily the users of this. And it uses a system that's called everyone gets a seat at the table and everyone eats, which means that basically everyone who gets involved in a trade gets their cut. And it's pretty cool. It has this humanitarian side, but of course you can make a lot of money trading there. You have a peer-to-peer exchange, you have a spot exchange, and if you're fancy and sort of a fiat lover, you can get the debit card for spending your coins, which I'm not a fan of, but you do whatever you like. NOONES.com is the URL, and thanks to all the sponsors for enabling this to happen without any kind of pressures or whatever. I can do whatever I want. So now let's pick some questions. There's Aaron van Wierdum, who's actually debating you very intensely on Nostr. But there's also someone in the chat.
Thank you, Aaron, for being a polite and respectful debater on Nostr, where we were talking recently.
There's also someone in the chat, and I'm gonna favor the person who's here as opposed to the person who just left a comment. He said, "I appreciate your
Weird
honesty."
Robot? Is that? Oh no, we're looking at different people. Okay, but there's also a comment on YouTube from Weird Robot. But go with yours first.
Okay. So SmartMark23 on Twitter says, "I appreciate your honesty and willingness to have a real discussion. Sorry for calling you a moron. I didn't see that. But really, dude, there are legal reasons we don't want to filter one another's transactions. It turns us into money transmitters, and all kinds of federal agencies will require we get licensed by them, and others will use us as a tool for their oppression. I guess you didn't know what miners are supposed to be doing. They're not supposed to be censoring valid transactions. When they start doing that, they stop being miners and start becoming bankers and need to get licensed as such."
I disagree with your legal analysis. I don't think that there is any law that says someone who filters transactions is a money transmitter. I don't think there's any law that says or implies that if a miner says no to a certain transaction, that makes them a money transmitter. That's not a thing. And if you think it is, maybe link me to a more complete legal analysis making that case. I'd like to examine it. But yeah, making up laws that helps no one. So there's no such law. Okay, so there's that. And you said one of the things you said in there is you said we don't want to filter other people's transactions. I don't think that's true, because I do want to filter other people's transactions, and so your word "we" is a first person plural, and I am not included in that. So you're wrong. I do want to filter other people's transactions, and apparently enough people agree with me that about 20% of nodes are running software that does filter people's transactions. So there's a lot of us who don't want to, or who do want to do that.
Yeah, I hope that this answer is satisfactory for Smart Mark 23. Now let's get to what Aaron is saying. He said, I was told to post my questions here. And he says, I think your first answer is kind of changing the topic. This is basically the conclusion from a longer conversation. Is your concern node centralization or is it fee pressure or both? This needs context, but look at
concerns.
this. It's huge. Like, how am I supposed to read this?
What you're not, but I will provide a link to that discussion, and then people who are interested in my discussion with Aaron Van Weerdem about this topic can look at it. So let me go get that link, and then we will continue with me answering that specific query. I believe he asked, "Is your concern node centralization or fee pressure or both?" I think both of those are valid concerns and worth addressing. So yeah, that's that. Great.
That was it.
Any further? Yeah, well, I'm sure it'll continue. We're gonna have more of this in on Nostr, but yeah, I think both of those are worth addressing. So, yeah.
You got a question from Kyle Moore, and you answered to it on Nostr, but I guess it's useful to also mention here. Is Spark spying on Lightning users?
Yes. They have published, I think it's them, published software that creates an explorer for Arc or Spark addresses. They have their own address format for their quasi layer 2-ish system. I'm unwilling to call Spark a layer 2 with their current design, but it's close. It's similar to a layer 2 and worth talking about in that context. They've published a block explorer for it, but it doesn't have blocks, so it's more like an address explorer. You can type in a Spark address and view its history of transactions and stuff like that. So any of these wallets that are coming out that use Spark as a backend, which they have a pretty cool user interface for them. Like they work really well. Good job on the software UX department guys at Spark. They've done really well with it. Anyone who uses it, you can plug in their address if they give it to you on the Spark Explorer. I think it's sparkscan.io, and you can view their current balance, their history of transactions, and that's not good for your privacy. That they are spying on you, and they're letting everyone else see all of your transaction history. This is also not necessary. They don't need to do this. Spark is an example of a state chain. And I'm really excited, by the way, that there's finally a state chain out in the wild that has real usage. It's got like thousands of users now. That's a success because state chains have been possible in Bitcoin since 2017, and no one ever used them until now.
They were used. There was, what was it called? That Mercury wallet, yeah, and Mercury layer.
I used Mercury once to participate in something called the State Chain Torch, and I don't think I've ever seen it used other than that. I think like enough people downloaded it to do a State Chain Torch, which had like a couple hundred people doing it, and I'm not aware of any other users. And then they ended up shutting down, which I don't think they would have done if it was if they were making money off of it. So yeah, I think it was just not very much demand for it, but there is demand for the Spark thing. They seem to be doing really well with it, and I'm excited about that. But the Mercury one, and I also have an implementation of state chains with one of my proof of concept apps. Both of the Mercury one and mine used something called a blinded server, which meant that the server did not know your balance, and he did not know your transaction history, and he didn't even know what your state chain address was. He didn't get to see it. In my implementation, he got to see a hash of your transactions. He got to see the transaction hash, and that's what he signed. He signed the SIG hash for your transactions, but he didn't get to see their contents unless and until you published it on chain. In the unilateral exit scenario, you would publish your transaction on chain, and then he would get to see he'd get to see a signature on there, and thus what he signed. But of course, by then it's too late for him to do anything about it. So that was my implementation of a blinded server. I believe Mercury used a more robust design that also hid the SIG hash from them. I think they used some sort of multi-party computation thing to make it so that they signed a SIG hash without seeing the hash that they were signing, which if that's what they were doing, that's really cool. I certainly didn't know how to implement that, so I just didn't. I just made it so they do get to see the hash, and then said, well, but the hash doesn't reveal the underlying data, so it's fine. Still counted as blinded in my definition. So they don't need to do this. A state chain can be done in such a way that the server does not see your balance or your transaction history. They have opted not to do that. They've opted to actually see that data and publish it for everyone else to see. And I think that's a mistake. I like the blinded server design better. So yeah, they're spying on you and letting everyone else spy on you too. That said, there are things you can do to mitigate the spying. The Bitcoin white paper also points out, and many have pointed out, that on Bitcoin's layer 1, everyone gets to see your public key. At least once you spend from a Bitcoin address, they can see your public key, and sometimes even before then. And they can see the balances of all those public keys. But there are still things you can do for your privacy. You can not associate a public key with your real-world identity. You can hide your IP address from things that you interact with by using services like Tor or VPN or what's the new stuff that's come out recently? Blinded transfer or whatever it's called, oblivious transfer. There's techniques for doing that as well. So you can do that. And then the other thing you can do is avoid public key reuse. In Spark and on Bitcoin L1, if you don't have your real world identity attached to a public key, then it seems to me the best someone can do is start profiling a public key and say, here's the history of its transactions. And, I may not know who you are, but I know that you spend at these times and you have received at least this amount, and they can start building up a profile on it. If you avoid public key reuse in both Spark and on Bitcoin L1, it gets harder for them to do that. They only get the information about when money enters an address and when it leaves, and not necessarily anything else. That said, there are unsolved problems like linking two public keys together. If you do a co-spend, you say, I'm going to spend money from this address and that address at the same time, that can harm your privacy. Same thing applies to Spark. If you are trying to avoid public key reuse, then you have to manage that. And then something like coin joins or similar things are going to be important there. And it's so new that no one's built any of this stuff out for it yet. But yeah, there are things you can do to mitigate their spying efforts, and we'll see. We'll see if I would like to work on that, and I hope other people do too, so that user privacy can be improved and still have a useful state chain system, despite the design decisions of the Spark operators. So that's the answer to that question. It was much more concise when I did it on Nostr. I think I did a 1 paragraph to say all that on Nostr, and here it's 3 minutes. But sorry, that's the advantage of text mediums.
That was really good. And it's also useful. Like, you would not expect the people who were promoting Libra like 6 years ago to come to Bitcoin and build something which is privacy friendly.
Maybe. I would not be surprised if they do. I would not be. There are some countries where, like lots of countries in the European Union, at least have made enough of a pretense about caring about privacy that they've passed laws saying, to the extent possible, you have to avoid disclosing this information publicly. So maybe there's something maybe there are some, I know that like Bull Bitcoin, as an example, they're a Bitcoin exchange that cites GDPR compliance. GDPR is one of the laws in the European Union that requires you to pretend to respect user privacy. Bull Bitcoin cites that as a reason for doing coin joins on all of their outgoing transactions. So they say, well, because in order to be compliant with GDPR and not disclose user balances to other people, we're going to coin join all of our outgoing transactions. At least we're doing that for a while. That's pretty cool. So like if they were able to think of a reason to do it in order to be legally compliant, maybe someone like Spark could be convinced to do the same thing. It's possible. I'm not holding my breath, but I think it's worth a shot. Try and convince them to do more coin joins and stuff, and even build it into their protocol as a way of bolstering user privacy in places where taking steps toward that is a legal requirement. Also, because it's just the right thing to do.
Here's project idea number 4.
Yeah, yeah. Nag, nag them to nag Spark to add privacy things by default into their layer two. So I'm still looking. I can't find now the link to the thread in which Aaron Van Weerdem and I were discussing this. It was just like a couple days ago that I was adding to it, but I'm going through
Oh,
my
it was a week
history
ago.
of posts on Nostr and not seeing it. There's another. You want to talk about Nostr problems? Finding stuff you posted a week ago is really difficult in Nostr land, and sucks.
There's also a question by Roland who says, or Roland, I'm not sure how you pronounce that. What are some downsides of ARCash besides privacy? Is it possible for the sender to steal the money before the receiver comes back online, or can it be locked to a receiver pub key like eCash, like Cashew? Are payments economical? Why would this not compete with Cashew since ARCash does not use the custody issue? Does not have the custody issue.
Uh, okay, I found the link that I wanted to share. So before I answer that question, I want to share a link with you. Can I do that inside of Google Chat or
Yes, you
Google
can actually
Meet?
share your screen if you want.
Okay, I posted an N event, a Nostr event, and if you post that into various Nostr clients like Primal or Coracle or Jumble, you can pull up the thread in which Aaron Van Weerdem and I were discussing that, and your viewers can do that. So put that in the show notes or something, please. ARCash. So, gentleman asked about ARCash, which is one of my latest projects. ARCash is an attempt by me to recreate Hedgehog on top of Arc. So one of the things I've been trying to do with Hedgehog for a long time is make it so that if I want to send you money, let's say I want to send you money, Vlad, I don't want to have to get something from you first. In Bitcoin, if I want to send you money, I have to ask you for a Bitcoin address or like go to your website and find a Bitcoin address there. If I want to send you a Lightning payment, I've got to ask you for a Lightning invoice or like find a Lightning address that you've created and send money to that. I think that's backwards because if you were standing in front of me and we weren't on the internet and I wanted to give you $5, I don't have to get anything from you. I can reach into my pocket, pull out $5 and just hand it to you. And now you have $5. Same with other monetary instruments like a check. If I want to write you a check, I don't need anything from you. I can just write it and then hand it to you. And I think that's how digital money should work. I think I should be able to digitally send you something, such as in an email or a DM, without having to say like download this wallet first, and then you can have the money. So with Hedgehog, for a long time, I've been trying to create that experience, and that's a big reason why I made it asynchronous, so that users can pay each other when the recipient is offline, and when the recipient does get online, they can import the money into their wallet if they have one, or download one, or whatever, without needing to interact with the sender. I wanted that for a long time in Hedgehog. I think I've taken a lot of steps toward getting there, but of course, as I mentioned earlier, I don't really care to commercialize it, and so no one really uses Hedgehog. No one really knows about it, other than people who listen to me a lot. But it occurred to me that the idea that I had also works on Arc. Arc can do this. If I put money, if I want to, what I can do is I can create an Arc private key, and a private key on the Arc layer 2 protocol, or not really protocol, at the various layer 2 applications that call themselves Arc. I can go and create a private key on them, send money to it, and then give you that private key. I can like email it to you, and you don't have to have an Arc wallet to use Arc. You can like I made a little website called ARCash, one of my GitHub projects. It's not a real website. You can just go to my GitHub and look for ARCash, ARCash, and it generates an Arc wallet in your browser when you visit this link and imports whatever string that I've sent you, and that string contains money. Like it's got however much money I deposited into that Arc private key, and once I've done that, then you can do whatever you want with it. You can hit the send over Lightning button. You can receive it into an Arc wallet. You can receive it onto Bitcoin L1. You can convert it into another cryptocurrency if you want to. It's got a bunch of things you can do with it. Some of which I haven't implemented yet. Yeah, so that's ARCash, which is just an attempt to recreate my desired goal with Hedgehog, but do it with a public server that someone's maintaining, which is Arc. It's not done yet. And I don't even think it's really self-custodial yet. So that was part of your question is it self, I think you asked, is it self-custodial? I don't think so. I think I'm like not validating the data given me by the ARC server yet in that app. And so they could just give me fake data and I would still send money to it, or you, if you use it, would still send money to it and they could run away with it. So I need to do more validation. I need to do stuff like, I think I have to rewrite their swap protocol because while writing it, I found out that their swap protocol sucks, or it does not sucks. It has features that I think are not ideal. So I want to like rewrite it and make my own swap protocol for it and then implement that. Anyway, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I have to do with ARCash in order to make it work the way that I want Hedgehog to work. So it's going to be some work either way, but at least with Arc, someone's maintaining that server. Whereas with my Hedgehog stuff, I don't even maintain those servers. I write them and put them on my GitHub and then just leave them, and no one does anything with them. So I think doing it on Arc is probably more promising than doing it the way I think is ideal, because someone might actually maintain it. So yeah, that is, I think that answers at least some of your. Oh, one of them was, is there a way, can the sender come back and run off with the money? Yes, he can, because in the way I'm designing it, he creates the private key, and so he can import that private key into his own ARC wallet, or just use the website that I have him share to take the money. So yes, the sender can just come back and run off with the money, and I think that's a good thing in certain scenarios. Like often when I'm onboarding people to Bitcoin, I'll give them $5 in Bitcoin, and then I wonder later, did they ever spend it? Did they ever do anything with it? I would like to be able to check, and if a year has gone by and they never did anything with it, I can tell them, hey, I took this $5 back because you didn't use it. I think that'd be good. So something like that, I think, is probably good. But can you make it so that you can only do that if you knew their public key? If you knew their public key, you could, like from Nostr or from Bitcoin or from Ethereum or something, if you knew a public key that they had that's compatible with Bitcoin, you could make a ARCash thing where you paste in their public key and encode the money so that it gets sent to that, and then they would have to import their private key into an ARC wallet in order to unlock that money. I don't, maybe that could also be useful for some scenarios, like where you want final settlement and where you can't take the money back. But I'm less interested in that. I kind of want the one where you can take it back if they don't do anything with the money. So yeah, I would probably not implement that. I hope that answers your question. There's also some questions from Weird Robot on YouTube. I think we should get to those. Do you see those, Vlad?
I do see a weird with a free.
Yeah, weird. To me, it says Weird Robot with a 3 where the weird is. So he has some questions.
I don't see them for some reason. So I do see his comments from Twitter.
Oh, well, let me read them. Could you mind if I read some of this?
No, it's fine.
I guess they don't have question marks, so I guess technically they're not questions, but I think he wants me to comment on them anyway. His first thing that I see is spam is always going to be a subjective term because it implies undesired, and what we desire and value is subjective. Do you see that comment on YouTube?
Maybe I should refresh my page or something.
Maybe I should too. So my answer to that is that Bitcoin and all of this, everything in Bitcoin is subjective if that's your definition of subjective. For example, the consensus rules would be subjective by this definition because some people don't like them. And you said if something's undesired, then it's subjective. Well, some people don't like Bitcoin, don't like our consensus rules. They make other rules, or they don't use cryptocurrency at all, and therefore Bitcoin is subjective by this definition. But if your definition covers the consensus rules and says like the mempool policy is subjective because some people don't like those mempool policies, and the consensus rules are also subjective because some people don't like those, then I don't think that's a very useful distinction in talking about whether something should be a consensus rule versus a mempool policy. It doesn't help if the point of distinction you're trying to make applies equally to both. So yeah, I think both of them are equally subjective by that definition, and by another definition, they're equally objective, as in the software will enforce the rules given it, and it will enforce the mempool policies given it, and it will treat them both as equally objective. The software treats them as rules to follow. So yeah, it's by a certain definition, they're perfectly objective rules. They're given to it from a third party, or from a first party, which is you, the user of the node, and your node just obeys them as things that it's been told to do. So yeah, I think the question isn't whether they are objective or subjective, but rather whether they're good or bad rules. And I think the mempool policies that I propose or use on my own node are good rules, and I'm happy to share on podcasts like this why I think so, which we already did that part earlier, so I don't want to do it again. But yeah, rewind and listen to my reasons for thinking they're good, and I think that's better than asking whether they're subjective or objective. Okay, so that's that. Another question, another comment. He says the off-chain solution isn't spam. This other one, Citrea, is spam cause reasons. I think he's mocking me. Are you mocking me, weird robot?
I think that this was posted like longer than an hour ago, and it sort of lacks context because it was a reaction to something that we were talking about at the time. But I do want to ask you, since we came back to this topic, do you think there's going to be a hard fork with people who, like the 20% who are running knots today, and they don't want to be in consensus with core anymore because of maybe ideological differences or technical disagreements? You think that there's going to be a separate chain for this?
No, I suppose I don't think BIP 44.4 is really going to go anywhere. I think it's possible. What I expect is that about 10% of knots nodes are going to actually run BIP 444. I don't even think Ocean Pool is going to enforce it. If I'm honest, if any pool is likely to enforce BIP 444, it would be Ocean Pool, and I don't think they're going to have the guts to go ahead and do it. So no, I don't think any hash. I think maybe 10% of Bitcoin nodes will run this soft fork, but no hash rate's going to be behind it. And yeah, I don't think anything's going to really happen there. So no, I don't think it's going to go anywhere.
Do you see a peaceful resolution for this cultural conflict that we have? Because I do believe that at this point, the issue that Bitcoin has is not technical, meaning that we do have a lot of proposals and a lot of solutions to the existing problems. The issue is cultural, where we ended up in this spot where we disagree with each other and any change is regarded as some sort of attack. And we don't seem to agree on anything. Like at one point we agreed that CTV is good, and then we stalled the conversation for a couple of years, and then we came back to it, and then we got this whole spam CSAM or whatever conversation, which seems to overshadow or outshine everything else. And until we're done with this, I don't think we're going to have any significant progress.
I don't think we're going to ever see a soft fork again in Bitcoin. I think it's ossified, and I'm sad about that, because it makes it really hard to improve software if it's ossified. But it seems to me that it is. I want to campaign for an ossification, deossification, but I don't have a whole lot of expectation that, or I don't foresee anything making Bitcoin deossify. Certainly not mine. I don't think that I'm going to have that much of an impact in my attempts. Also, I don't think when you say we agreed on CTV for a while, I don't think the majority of influencers in Bitcoin ever agreed on CTV being a good idea, and I don't think they do today.
But since when are the influencers the one that make up the consensus? Like it used to be just a bunch of technical people and developers and economical nodes, and I don't think that influencers are either of these, including myself. Like I'm not gonna blow my own toot and pretend that I'm more important than I actually am.
Well, I will pretend for you. No, by influencers, I was including people who influence the development of Bitcoin, as in the developers themselves. I consider influencers in this sentence. And yeah, I think when CTV first was proposed, there was a lot of pushback against it, especially because, as I recall anyway, everyone said Taproot's a better idea or more of a priority, and there was like wait till after Taproot to do anything with CTV. And once Taproot was finished, and he was like, okay, now let's do CTV. There was still pushback. It was like a lot of developers to this day say there's no use cases for CTV. There's no well, I don't know. There's no tests for it. They say, or stuff like this. I can't remember all the things that I've read. Um, Partly because I'm in favor of it. I want CTV, and so I think there are use cases and there are tests. I've made some of them. But there are people who say things that don't make sense to me, like there are no use cases, there are no tests, there's no demand, and yeah, it seems to me that there's never been consensus and among people who have influence in Bitcoin protocol development that it's a good idea, and never even also not among podcasters and such. Even if you use the definition of influencers, that's just like people like you. Even those, I don't think the majority of them have ever been in favor of CTV. So yeah, I don't think it's going to happen, which is sad because I want it, and I consider myself an influencer, but I don't, not with enough influence to get it through. So we'll see.
I think it was just before we got to this point where Luke started becoming very aggressive in his campaign to promote knots and stop spam that we and by we I mean there was actual consensus, which is rare, that CTV and CSFS is the way to go. I remember there was a lot of signaling for this, and it seemed to be like the way to go. And for those who are not aware, like CTV, the best way that I describe it is that it's programming transactions so that you can broadcast and have them confirmed into blocks when the demand for block space is low. And that's the way in which it scales Bitcoin. It allows you, correct me if I'm wrong, this is my simplistic description of what it does, but it helps you program or at least have your transactions confirmed when you condition them to, not necessarily when you set this fee level.
It also makes that safe by making it so that that you can, it makes it so that certain class of transactions that use this can't be double spent. You can't go back on them. So that's my mom. Hi, Mom. Yeah, so that's one of the things it does. I forget now. I've lost my train of thought.
No, we're talking about what CTV does.
Yeah. So that's one of the things it does. But I had a point that I was going to make after that, and now I forget that too. Great. Yeah, I don't think we're going to get CTV, sadly, but I'm certainly in favor of it, and I will campaign. I will continue to campaign for it being a good idea. Same thing with this BIP 444 thing. I think that's a good idea, or at least, well, part of it is. I really don't like the emergency deployment part of the proposal, but the rest of it seems decent. So, but
I think there was also something in BIP 444 about automatic updates that was being discussed.
Was there? I didn't see that. Let me go back to it. Censorship would be selectively blocking specific users based on their identity. The rules proposed in this BIP do the opposite. They are applied universally, automatically, and impersonally to all transactions regardless of origin. That's the only time where the word automatic appears in this document. It's possible there's a synonym.
Can you search for update or something?
Search for update. Before that word update does appear, it appears once. It says, each entity is responsible for monitoring the network and determining when it is safe to resume operations. Before resuming operations, be sure your own nodes are updated to enforce the software for your own security. I believe this is like an instruction for miners on how to do the, not miners, it says exchanges and other businesses on how they expect the software to be deployed. Yeah, this is the part that I don't like. But even this part doesn't talk about automatic updates. It says be sure your node is updated. That doesn't sound automatic to me. But yeah, this is describing like what to do if miners start to enforce this soft fork using the emergency deployment method. And that part I think is a bad idea of this BIP. But yeah, they're saying if that happens, then you should update your nodes to enforce this new rule. So that part I like. I would like it if exchanges and businesses update their nodes to support this BIP. I just hope it doesn't get deployed. I don't like the deployment method, the emergency deployment method it proposes. So yeah, but I don't see anything about automatic updates in the proposal. But yeah, I also read it before. I read it yesterday and didn't see any. I think I would. Yeah, I don't see anything. I don't think it's in there. I don't think there's anything about automatic updates.
It's fine. I guess we can move on. On
Great.
your request, which you made like 20 minutes ago about sending you the link to your conversation with Aaron van Beerdum on Nostr, I did send you that on Telegram, and you can click the link.
No, I wanted you to share it with everyone. I wanted to put it in the show notes eventually.
Okay.
Yeah. So that because he and I have had a great thread on that, and right now I'm not replying to it because I'm on a podcast. But he is the most latest person to reply, so now it's my turn to reply again. So it's ongoing.
On YouTube, there's Frank-Wood 3128. He says most improvements were attacks on Bitcoin. And then he adds nice Satoshi invented banker coin. Emergency deployment, like he's reacting to what we're saying.
Oh yeah, he wonders what the emergency deployment is. We should probably go over that. Most soft forks in Bitcoin's history have suggested a way of deploying them on the network. And different soft forks have used different deployment methods. Usually, or at least the last one that I recall doing was Taproot, and part of the procedure for Taproot was miner signaling. Miners would signal, we're going to start, or such and such a percentage of us are in favor of and ready for the new soft fork, like they're running the new software that has the soft fork, and they had like a kind of a policy which said that if 90% of the miners in their blocks signal that they're ready to deploy this, to activate the soft fork, I think it was 90%, then like 100 blocks later, they were going to start actually enforcing it, and any blocks disobeying the soft fork would then be invalid. And that was cool. You could. I remember my friend Hampus Schoberg made a website where you could count the number of blocks that came out and signaled support, and he had
that
little,
was beautiful.
kind of a.
Taproot
it was
watch.
Great. So I really liked that deployment method. That was really fun. It got Bitcoiners engaged. We made hats and stuff about signaling. They were represented as like green block emojis or green square emojis, and there were red squares and green squares, and there were hats for them and conference. It was fun. It was great. I would like to do it that way again. That's how I would like to see BIP 444 enforced. And it says in the BIP that's like something like that is a good way to enforce it. It doesn't say specifically how they want to enforce it or activate it rather, but it says something like I think they use the term flag day, which is like miners using a flag, a bit flag to indicate that they support or are ready to enforce the BIP. So I support something like that. Particularly, I want to do it again with the green blocks and the red blocks and that stuff. That was fun. The same way we did it with Taproot. Let's do it again with this. But they have proposed an emergency deployment method, which is if somebody puts a terrible illegal image in a block after this BIP has been, now that it's been proposed, then they propose, or at least my reading of the BIP is they propose that miners collectively run they basically run the invalidate block command on that block and say this block is invalid, and then start enforcing the soft fork immediately without doing signaling and flags and stuff. They just start doing it immediately, and thus any transactions in that block, including the offensive one, would then be invalid, and because of the new rules. And then that's the new state of the network. Then we move forward, and you can only make transactions that follow the new rules. That sounds, well, it kind of sounds fun, but it's fun in a scary way. I like the fun I had with the I like the fun that I had with the Taproot one, where it didn't seem to me anyone was scared of it. Having miners suddenly start enforcing new rules without signaling beforehand when they're going to do so sounds disruptive and bad to me. So I don't like that proposal. But yeah, we'll see. Maybe miners will want to do it, and they'll have maybe it'll be fun. I guess if it happens, then in 10 years, looking back on it, I'll be able to say I'll be able to tell funny stories about it. So we'll see. But that's what I mean by the emergency deployment.
Yeah, there's SmartMark23 who says he's gonna emergency deploy, quote unquote, some shit on the whole network at once.
Well, that sounds like the status quo. Welcome to inscriptions. That's already what they're doing.
Yeah. You also mentioned something about prediction markets and the fact that you got into this, and you suggested I should include this in the title. But before that, I gotta make a confession to you. During this time when it seems like Bitcoiners fight a lot and they insult each other, I found some mental solace, or how should I put it, like some refuge from all of this craziness in Zcash, and also got rich in the meantime for some reason. Like it actually went up. I bought it last year, now it's like $400 something, and I promise that once it crosses $400 again, I'm gonna do the Zcash pump dance, which is this one. Okay, I've done this. Now let's move on.
I hereby register a negative, a disapproval of this announcement. All right, then you've done your part and I've done my part.
That's fine. It's what I wish Bitcoin was like.
Okay. Well, my prediction market proposal has nothing to do with that. It is not a privacy thing. I do have some recent privacy stuff I've been working on, and if you're interested in talking about making Bitcoin more like Zcash, I have a proposal for doing something like range proofs, or maybe they qualify as actual range proofs on Bitcoin, and I think Zcash uses those. So maybe I should talk about that.
Yeah, you should.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I've been researching range proofs recently, and it occurred to me that they're probably possible on Bitcoin natively if you do my usual trick of redefining things, saying that now I'm going to use this word to mean this other thing, and that's close enough. So specifically, what I want to read, how I want to define it is, well, let me tell you about PayJoin first. So if you've ever used PayJoin in a Bitcoin wallet, a few wallets support it. More recently, I think Take Wallet added support within the last year. Maybe before that. I don't know. I started using Cake Wallet within the last year, and it supports it. They have support for this thing where, let's say I'm creating a Bitcoin transaction and sending it to you. Normally, without PayJoin, I would do that by selecting coins that I own, or a Bitcoin address that has some coins in it. That would become my from address, and I would get an address from you. That would be the to address, right? And I would send money from my from addresses, one or more of them, to your to address. The PayJoin people realized that if you contribute an address to my from addresses, then we can make it look like you're receiving a different amount than you're really receiving. For example, if it looks like if I want to send you 5 Bitcoins and you contribute an address that
please
already
send me
has
5 Bitcoins.
Yeah, well, if I want to, and you contribute an address to the from side of the transaction that already has 2 Bitcoins in it, then if we make it so that my Bitcoin transaction sends you 7 Bitcoins, well, 2 of them already belong to you, so you're really only getting 5. Does that make sense? And that's a PayJoin, because it looks like I'm sending you one amount, but really you already owned part of that amount, so you're really receiving a different one. It occurred to me that the process by which those things work creates something that, by at least a random definition I came up with, counts as a range proof. Specifically, the range is the amount of Bitcoin I sent you is somewhere between 0 and 7 Bitcoins. It's actually 5, but you have no way of knowing exactly what the amount is I sent. It could be that all of the Bitcoins went back to me, and so it's really I sent you 0. It could be that you owned 2 of them, and so I sent you 5. It could be that you owned all of them, and so I sent you 0. It could be that I sent you 7. Like, there's 4 possibilities there within that simple transaction. So that's a range. There's a range of possibilities. 0, I guess it's 3, 0, 5, or 7. are the possible options, and it happens to be one of the ones in that range. So if you think of it as a range of 3 items, and it's one of those, like a random one that you can't tell in advance, that's cool. That's a range proof. So then I started thinking, how do you increase the range? How do we make it so that there's a larger range, so that it hides more data? And I thought, well, you could add more inputs and more outputs. So what if I have like 10 inputs, 10 from addresses in my transaction? How many of them belong to you? Maybe 3 of them, maybe 5 of them, maybe 8 of them belong to you already. And how many outputs do we create? Well, let's say I make 10 outputs for you. The amount that I'm sending you could be any combination of those output addresses, but also adding in 0 as an option and the total sum. I could be sending you all of them. All of those outputs could be yours. And so now you've got a range of like the combinatorics of whatever 10 choose. I think it's 10 factorial. 10 factorial would be the number of the range there. And that's not that expensive to do. 10 inputs, 10 outputs. It's about 3 times the size of a regular transaction, and you could have a 10 factorial range, which is really good for hiding outputs in, or hiding the amount sent. So I thought of this, and I thought I should make an implementation of a wallet that does this, where it just sends you a bunch of different outputs, and you contribute 0 or more inputs to the input side of the transaction. And then anyone analyzing this transaction has no idea what amount you received. It could be anything in the range from 0 to the sum. That'd be cool. But the other thing I thought would be cool is, but apart from doing it that way, it occurred to me that if you add in Lightning into the mix, it gets even better. So I thought of, since I came up with Papa Swaps, where, to get back to the original topic in this thing, in Papa Swaps, I made it so that you can receive money on L1 and atomically receive a similar amount on L2, with it, like, so that the one doesn't happen unless the other one happens, like atomically. You could use that to receive your change on Lightning. So if I wanted to send you 5 Bitcoins, I could actually send you 10 Bitcoins in an output, but receive the remaining 5 on Lightning from you in a Papa Swap. And so if you do that, then you can have the change be any amount. I could be even sending you 1 Satoshi. I could send you 10 Bitcoins on L1, but you send me 10 Bitcoins minus 1 Satoshi on L2. And so there's an actually complete range. The entire range from 0 to the sum becomes a possibility in this idea. So yeah, that's I think you can do. I think Bitcoin has native support for range proofs, which is a Zcash, a thing they use in Zcash, but nobody's done it yet. Nobody's implemented it. I don't even think I've implemented it. I don't even think I've made a proof of concept of this yet. I just came up with the idea and was like, yeah, that could work. Unless you count pay joins. Pay joins technically do it, because that's what I was thinking about when I came up with this idea. And they have a very small range of like 3 values are possible. So yeah, I think we have native range proofs on Bitcoin. And I think you could make a wallet that uses that to hide in every transaction the amount sent to the recipient. It'd be really cool.
Sure. But you still can't actually have any kind of privacy for the sender and the receiver. It's just like a deniability for the amount.
Well, I think that's something. But part of the thing in the world of privacy, there's 3. You want to hide the sender's public key, the recipient's public key, and the amount. So one out of 3 is something. It may not be very good, but it's something. If we were able to hide the amount, and also there are implications for receiver privacy there as well, because I don't think it would be easy to tell which of those addresses belongs to the recipient. It could be any of them, or well, it would. I suppose it would have to be. Would it have to be one of them? I don't know. Now I'm getting a new idea as I'm speaking. There might be a way to make it so that his address isn't in there as well. Once you add in Lightning, that seems possible. Probably you need his address. Probably one of those addresses would be in there, but it would be like 1 of 10, and so you wouldn't know which one it is, which is useful for receiver privacy as well. And would it have implications for sender privacy? I suppose it would have the same implications that pay joins do, because you don't know how many inputs the recipient contributed. So not all of the sending addresses might really belong to the sender. My computer's going to turn off in 60 seconds. I have to go try and run to a charger. Do I? Yeah, I can do that. So keep you you talk.
I'll talk. Okay, let me check the chat to see what else has been posted over the last 10 minutes or so. There is Smart Mark who added that Super Testnet is describing how miners are now going to be operating Swift and doesn't even miss a beat. Never ever mentions whose transactions will no longer be valid, as in it will be your transactions. I think he dropped out, which is unfortunate. His laptop died, but he will come back. He does have the link for this. All he has to do is just plug his laptop to electricity and then boot the system, and he's gonna be back. In the meantime, I do hope that you guys enjoy this conversation. I think it's possibly the most civil debate I've ever had with someone who supports Bitcoin nuts. Usually it's just hostility and people being, I don't know, building straw men about each other and just assuming what the other one believes in and trying to create echo chambers. And in all honesty, it's horrible. And I think if we went back and we actually got people inside of a room to agree with each other, it would be much better. He's back. Da-da-da-da.
Hi, I think I'm back.
Yes, you are.
Sorry about that. My computer ran out of batteries, and I'm on my cell phone now. So
that was a super risky move, by the way. Like, just not charging your laptop when you got that warning.
Well, when I got the warning, I ran up to charge it, but I was too late. I got to my charger, which is upstairs, a few seconds after it shut down. So, sorry.
Missed opportunity to ask your mom to bring the charger.
Yeah, I suppose so. I missed your question. You said you were going to read a question, and I didn't hear it because I was running.
I don't think it's much of a question. It's just Smart Mark being bitter about the situation, saying that only Visa, MasterCard, and the banks governments say are okay will be able to do. So basically only these entities will be able to do transactions on chain. And he ironically says that's exactly what I signed up for. Oh yeah, let's just make up new definitions for words without bothering to tell people we're talking to what our definition really is. You just watch their public address and examine the outputs to their wallet that their wallet receives. And he adds, he sounds like a banker to me, wants to censor valid transactions.
Okay. Yeah. So I don't think that, or I think that the reasons why, the reasons for the proposal to censor invalid transactions are good. Like it used to be that in Bitcoin there were transactions you could create, like the ones that we now use the encoding mechanism that encodes Taproot for. You used to be able to use them for other things that were not Taproot. You used to be able to use them for spam, for example. You could do that. And we repurposed the encoding scheme that we use for Taproot now to say you can no longer use that for spam. It has to be used, like if you post anything that's not a valid Taproot transaction using that encoding format, it's going to be invalid. And I think it was a good reason, because Taproot does useful things, and I want that in Bitcoin. So like there are reasons why making something invalid when it used to be valid is good, and that's how we do. For example, that's how we do upgrades in Bitcoin. And I think that the reasons why proposing to invalidate spam transactions is a good idea. If you invalidate, or at least if you invalidate large spam transactions, that makes it so that Bitcoin nodes are more efficient at the thing that I want them to do, which is make Bitcoin the world's money. So I'm in favor of that because I think the reason for doing it is good. If, let's say, the US government came down with a rule and said all nodes in the United States, or they'd probably say everywhere, they'd probably say all nodes everywhere have to enforce the OFAC list and not allow transactions to and from addresses on the OFAC list, I would say that's a bad rule. because the OFAC list says things like anyone from Cuba, anyone from North Korea, anyone from Russia, you're just not allowed to send money to them at all. That's worse money. Money that you can't send to people in Russia or people in Cuba or people in North Korea is a worse money than a money where you can do that. And so if they proposed this, if they proposed adding the OFAC list to Bitcoin, I would look through the reasons and I would say, these are terrible reasons. I'm not running that on my node. And yeah, I don't really think BIP 444 changes this in any way. It's just saying here's reasons for invalidating spam transactions, or at least the large ones and in the specific formats that are popular right now. It says let's disable those, and I think the arguments are good ones, so I'm in favor of it. But yeah, if the government came out with the OFAC list and said you should censor these just because we are in like a non-war but semi-war-like situation with Russia, that's a bad reason to block those transactions. So I'm not going to do it, and I hope other Bitcoiners would not do it either. But yeah, I do think it's up to each Bitcoiner what filters they're going to run on their own node. So yeah, I hope that helps answer that criticism.
He says you did not define anything about like what parameters would be judged or what would be defined as spam. So all he's hearing is ability to render valid transactions as being invalid, i.e. you can make my transactions invalid.
Well, the BIP does specify what transactions it wants to invalidate. So I made a partial list of them earlier in this podcast. You can go listen to that part, or the BIP specifies it's 7 different fields that it wants to disallow more than a certain amount of bytes in those. So yeah, I think it's pretty specific about what it wants to do. Go check that out for more details.
I honestly think that a better use of your ability and intellect is to use the remaining time to talk about your ideas to make Bitcoin more like Zcash, which is really something that I'm interested in. I know that there is Shielded CSV by Liam Egan and Robin Linus and Jonas Nick. And there's also ZK Coins, which is a proposal by Robin Linus. And once we're done with this, I also want you to mention prediction markets, because once again, we put this in the title, but we barely scratched the surface.
Yeah, I haven't. Well, we haven't yet. We've just mentioned that it's something we want to talk about. We should probably do that then, because I don't actually know anything about shielded CSV other than I think it's similar to ZK Coins, and the only thing I really know about ZK Coins is that that's similar to RGB, but without the ever-growing transaction thing. Like, if you now I'm introducing a whole new topic. RGB was a proposal for issuing altcoins on Bitcoin, on Bitcoin's, well, I want to say on Bitcoin's blockchain, but really they were designed to do it on a layer 2. And a difficulty with them was that if you wanted to send somebody one of these altcoins that you issued, you had to send them a signature proving a thing. And every time that if they wanted to send it to their friend, they had to send them their own signature plus your previous one. And then the next person would have to send 3 signatures, and the next person would have to send 4 signatures, and so forth. You always had to include all prior signatures. And I think ZK Coins tried to make it so you can issue altcoins on Bitcoin without doing that, or without having that encumbrance. They would still be on a layer 2, but you would no longer have to send all prior signatures every time you send the coin. So that was an efficiency improvement. And that's really about the only thing I know about ZK Coins, is that it's like an improvement on RGB. And shielded CSV, I don't even know what that is yet. I think it has something to do with, like, it's very similar to ZK Coins, but even better somehow. So I have nothing further to say about that, because I don't know enough about the proposals to say anything.
Yeah, but do you have like a general idea or impression about Zcash? This was supposed to be Zero Cash, a soft fork that came to Bitcoin, or was proposed for Bitcoin in 2013. It came from Matthew D. Green, who is a cryptographer and researcher. And I think so. If you go back to the CoinJoins thread on Bitcoin Talk, Greg Maxwell mentions there that this is like a short-term solution until Bitcoin gets, at the time it was 0 coin. That was the first paper, and then it was refined into 0 cash. So this was part of the conversation for improving Bitcoin's privacy with zero knowledge proofs. We never actually got this. It could be implemented with a soft fork. It did not. I understand why it did not, because there were some flaws in there. There was this trusted setup, which got removed like 3 years ago in Zcash. And nowadays we can just take that and soft fork it onto Bitcoin and have possibly the best privacy we can actually have for the Bitcoin design. Do you have any opinions on it?
Not really. I haven't looked into the Zcash white paper yet, or how Zcash works. About the only thing I know is what's in the name is uses some form of zero knowledge proof. That's the ZK part. Beyond that, I don't know how it works. So I haven't investigated it or looked into it. Sounds great.
I can get you on board if you really want to look at transactions and understand how this works. Just install a wallet. I'll send you some coins and you can take it from there.
Well, if you send me any Zcash coins, I'm immediately converting them to Bitcoin.
That's fine.
So,
you can actually, so with this wallet that they have, and I'm not promoting it or anything, but they actually have this feature where you can scan a QR code from another coin like Bitcoin, and it's going to do this swap directly into Bitcoin. So you don't have to do anything. It works in the background.
That part sounds like a cool feature. I like it when someone can send me whatever thing they have and I get Bitcoin. But I usually use like sites like Fixed Float and Sideshift and stuff for that, because I don't have to download anything. I go to the website and it does it for me. But yeah, we can talk about that afterwards. I really don't want to spend much time talking about spending how you're going to send me altcoins on this podcast.
Well, it's going to be a super live net experiment. It's not a test net. But once again, this could have been Bitcoin, and the Drivechain for privacy for Bitcoin actually uses Zcash as opposed to Monero, which I know you spent a lot of time looking into. I wish you spent it looking into Zcash because that's the one that's actually compatible with Bitcoin.
Cool. Yeah, but eventually maybe I'll get to it, but I haven't done it yet. So
no pressure.
Keep on saying it. Maybe in 2 more podcasts I'll be like, maybe I should take a look at how Zcash works.
Actually, it's what gets me excited. Like, gives me hope that we can fix Bitcoin when I take a look at it. Anyway, prediction markets. Tell me more about it.
Yeah. So I was trying to think recently of a way to do prediction markets in Bitcoin, and I think I came up with something. And let me I have to think of how to. Now I don't have my laptop in front of me. I don't have my notes on what I wanted to say. So now I'm going to struggle. The general idea came from some improvements I thought of. Well, other people thought of some of them, and I finally implemented them for DLCs. So I should probably start with what DLCs are and how those work, because that's the thing I'm trying to improve upon. DLCs in Bitcoin are discrete log contracts, is what the term stands for. They're a way for 2 people to make a prediction about some future event and have a third party dictate where some money goes depending on the outcome of that event. So for example, if it's a sports game, we could say, I bet that the Atlanta soccer team is going to beat whoever they're playing against in an upcoming game, and you, Vlad, you want to bet that they're going to lose, that Atlanta will lose. So what we're going to do is we're going to have ESPN be our oracle. It's called an oracle, the third party who decides where the money goes. And we're going to create a Bitcoin address. And there's a few different ways to do it. But with DLCs, it's like fancy cryptography that says if the oracle reveals a certain secret, that means I get the money. And if he doesn't reveal that secret, that means you get the money. And that's how DLCs work broadly. Sometimes you see people use them on Twitter. They usually use an escrow for this, so it's technically not a DLC, but it's pretty similar, where they'll say like, put your money where your mouth is. I'm gonna if such and such thing happens, you'll get some money. And if they don't, I'll get the money, and we'll have, and they'll pick someone on Twitter to be the escrow, and they'll give the money to him in the meantime. Or they'll do a 2 of 3 multi-sig and just have him sign the transaction. So sometimes people do this on Twitter. I don't think these DLCs or escrow solutions scale very well in terms of the interface that I want to see for prediction markets, which is I want a prediction market to be like, I go to a website for will Atlanta win the soccer game, and I see a Bitcoin address that says yes, they'll win the soccer game, and a Bitcoin address that has a label on it that says no, they won't win the soccer game. And then I can send money to either of those Bitcoin addresses. I just put money in them, let's say $10, and near the end of the game, or when the game is finished, I get more money out if I sent money to the right Bitcoin address. I can withdraw money from it, withdraw more than I put in. That's kind of the interface that I want in prediction markets. And so I started trying to think of ways. Why do DLCs not really let you do that, or at least not without changes? And the big reason is because the DLC contract, you have to specify who your counterparty is when you make the address. The address typically for a DLC is a 2 of 2 multi-sig with the 2 counterparties, in this case, me and you. And then it has another condition, which is the revelation of a secret. And they use magic zero knowledge stuff to do that part without adding any on-chain footprint. Or you can just use a 2 of 3 multi-sig and say the third piece of data is a signature by the oracle or the escrow saying the money should go to this person or that person. But because you need in a DLC, regardless of how you do it, you always need both parties' keys in there, the 2 people to the bet. You can't set up a Bitcoin address ahead of time that encodes the script because you don't know who your counterparty is ahead of time. If I just go to a website and say I want to bet on whoever on the Atlanta, I don't know who's taking the other side of that bet. So for a while, one of the proposals in the DLC space was an attempt to make them compatible with the Lightning Network. And one of the ideas for how to make them compatible with the Lightning Network was to use something called a proxy. And this is an idea that I finally implemented that allows you to not have to know your counterparty in advance. Are you still there? Can you I don't have your visual on me anymore since I'm on my cell phone.
Yeah, I'm listening.
I don't know. It's not, okay, cool. So I didn't get dropped or anything. So the way that the proxy proposal was to make them compatible with the Lightning Network was that you would be making this bet not with your real counterparty or someone else who wants to bet against Atlanta. You'd actually be making it with a Lightning node who is on the path between you and your and whoever you're betting with, whoever your counterparty is in this bet. So your Lightning node would take the yes side in one contract and the no side in the other. And thus, if the Atlanta wins, then in his contract with me, who's betting that Atlanta will win, the Lightning node loses money in that contract, but simultaneously, he also has a contract with my real counterparty, and his contract is the reverse there. So if Atlanta wins, the proxy, who's the Lightning node in between us, gets money. He gets however much money was at stake. And thus, really, we're not, even though we're technically betting with the Lightning node in between us, he's just forwarding the money between us using the Lightning protocol. And so it feels really, we're not really betting with him because it's a wash for him. He gets the same amount of money either way. We're really betting with one another, with me and whoever is on the other side. So this has been proposed for I don't know, several years now, but I don't think anybody implemented it. So I did. I actually made an implementation of that, and it's on my GitHub, github.com/supertestnet/Aggius, AGGEUS, Aggius. And yeah, that's the primary difference with this one is that, one of the differences is that I implement this proxy thing. But the other one is that I make it so that you don't actually have to know who your counterparty is in advance. And the way I do that is I make it so that I use a technique from the ordinals world, or in ordinals marketplaces, they use partially signed Bitcoin transactions, which the seller of an ordinal creates a signed Bitcoin transaction that says you can have the ordinal as long as you pay me, $50 or whatever it costs for that ordinal for that piece of data. So I use that idea to say, well, if you can set up a trade where you've already signed the transaction and someone else just has to complete it if they want to take the counterparty, be the counterparty in that trade, then I think I can make that interface that I talked about where you just send to a Bitcoin address, because that means you can sign a transaction without knowing who your counterparty is. You can sign a transaction that lets someone take the other side of a trade without you needing to do anything more. You've already signed your part, and it's just up to them if they want to finish it. So I also implemented this idea, this thing from Ordinals marketplaces. They call them PSBT auctions, but I did it for a DLC, or a less fancy DLC. I didn't do the zero knowledge stuff that they do. Mine's more like an escrow situation where the oracle who's deciding who won the game acts as the third key. So you create a signed transaction that says the proxy can, at any moment he wants to, enter into this contract with me. He can move my money from the address I sent it to into the DLC, where then he gets money if he wins, or I get money if he loses. But of course, he doesn't want to do that immediately because he doesn't actually want to be in the trade. He's just trying to act as a proxy and find a counterparty for me. So what he does is he announces on a website that my trade is available, and he waits for someone to come along who wants to take the other part of this, to take the other side of this trade. And if he finds someone, if someone comes along and says, I want to bet that Atlanta will lose the football game or the soccer game, then he signs another transaction with them that creates the reverse contract, the one where the proxy wins if Atlanta wins, and my counterparty wins if Atlanta loses. And once he's signed that transaction and they're in their contract with one another, now he broadcasts the partially signed Bitcoin transaction that I created that puts me in the same contract. And as a result of this, we're now in the situation where we have a proxy, just like in the Lightning Network proposal, but it was non-interactive. I didn't have to be online for it because I already signed my part whenever I sent money to that Bitcoin address that I spoke of in the beginning. So yeah, that's the most of it. That's 2/3 of the protocol for this prediction market right there, is just making it so that you can create offers without needing to know who your counterparty is in advance because you're using a proxy. And then the last section of this protocol, which I actually have not implemented yet, but there's a protocol description for it, is non-interactively selling your position, which is in Polymarket, which is, I think, a really good UX for doing stuff. I don't have to wait until the Atlanta game to exit my position. If, let's say that Atlanta had a 40% chance of winning, according to polls and such, when I entered the contract, if they rise to 60%, I should be able, and on Polymarket I can, take my money out. I can say, I put in $100 on Atlanta, they went up in chances, and so I can leave before the game even happens with $120 because they went up by 20%, and so I get 20% more than I started out with. So the third part of my protocol implements, or if I actually did it in software, it would implement that as well and make it so that you can leave your contract with more money than you started out with if you're before the game even happens. And the way I do that is, once again, with partially signed Bitcoin transactions. You sign a transaction that says, for your what's his name, for the proxy, that says, if you will send me 20% more than I started out with, then you can take you get the rest. You get the rest of the money in our contract, and you don't have to wait for the game to finish. You can just take the money. I sign a transaction that lets him do that, and we can do that because it's a 2 of 2 multisig. So we can, as long as he has my signature, he can sign the other half. But of course, he doesn't want to do that immediately, because if he did, he's still on the hook for my counterparty. And if Atlanta loses, the game, he would lose more money than he gains, which is not what he wants. He wants to be a neutral third party in this thing. But once I've signed this thing saying, as long as I get 20% more than I started with, you can take the rest of the money in the contract. He looks for someone who's willing to do that. He says, there's a contract for sale. Someone wants to exit from their position in this marketplace, and they're basically willing to put they currently have $100 in this contract, but as long as they get 120, you get the opportunity to win like the remainder in this bet with this other person. And that means that someone who wants to get into this bet only has to supply $20, 20 additional dollars on top of the regular cost to enter the contract. And that might be worth it to them, because if they buy into the contract now, when Atlanta has a higher chance of winning, because they went up by 20%, it would cost them more to do that, and they'd have to wait. They'd have to wait for someone to take the other side of their bet. Whereas my contract's for sale right now at the current market rate. So they can just pay the extra $20 that gets me my position, and now they've got a position in this marketplace. And thus I was able to exit non-interactively. I didn't have to, I just made an offer and someone then took it, and I didn't have to be online to finish it because of the PSBT auction, because of the way they work. So yeah, that's basically all three parts of the proposal. It allows you to recreate the experience of something like Polymarket, but natively on Bitcoin, using PSBT auctions and DLCs and this proxy thing that was proposed for Lightning DLCs. And I've implemented 2/3 of it on my GitHub, and the other part makes sense theoretically. And all of this is done without introducing any third-party blockchain that you have to use that has more smart contracting features, and the proxy never holds custody of any user funds. You're just using standard DLCs, or well, actually not standard. I kind of modified those too. But it could work with standard DLCs, except I just don't like all the ZK. It's difficult to implement them because of all the zero-knowledge proof stuff. But you could do it with a regular DLC, and so I think it's really cool. It's a prediction market, or at least theoretically, if someone wants to actually build a real-world version that can work just fine natively on Bitcoin. So I presented this at one of the conferences recently. I forget which ones I present all these things at, but I presented it at one of the conferences, and the YouTube video should be going out soon. And Paul Stork was there. And I have a story to tell about him, but perhaps you have questions before we get to the Paul Sports story.
That was actually going to be my follow-up, because the idea of doing prediction markets on Bitcoin has been tried before. It goes back to at least a decade ago, and it was Paul Stork was maybe the first big advocate for it. And he was trying to build the Hivemind, which I think initially was called Truthcoin. And I wanted to ask you if you got any feedback from him, first of all, and secondly, how your proposal for prediction markets, which I'm not sure if it has a name yet, but maybe it should have some geeky name, but how is it different from Hivemind?
Well, I haven't read, so I went to Paul Sports at this conference. He didn't see my talk. But he was at the conference doing his own presentation. I think his presentation was about how Lightning sucks. So
I watched that on YouTube.
Oh, cool. So I went to talk to him after his talk, and I said, I came up with a way to do prediction markets. And he was like, you're like the 100th person who's come up with a way to do prediction markets. Tell me how yours is different. Or no, he didn't say tell me how yours is different. He said, tell me how you solve the Oracle problem. Do you know well, I should go over what the Oracle problem is. Do you want to say what it is? Actually, you might have a better way of putting the Oracle problem than I do.
Yeah, so basically when you make this kind of bet, you have to agree on a third party which is going to give the outcome. That's the Oracle. Basically, the Oracle tells you the truth, what really happened. We can both gamble on this match or bet on what the price of Bitcoin is going to be next week or something. We do need to agree on a trusted third party that's going to give us the information.
Right, and he has to be trusted, because what if he just always reports that Atlanta wins the game? If we're betting on an Atlanta game, and I tell him, hey, I'm betting on this Atlanta game, just no matter what happens, report that I won. That way I get the money out of the Bitcoin contract. Or sign for me, sign a transaction that says Atlanta won, so that I get the money. You could do that, and so you have to trust the Oracle not to do that. And then the other thing they can do is they can participate in the market. Instead of colluding with other people, they can just start buy, even if Atlanta is about to lose, they can buy a bunch of shares, a bunch of predictions saying that Atlanta is going to win, and then report that they won, and thus get all that money. So like the Oracle can do these things, and it's called the Oracle problem because it's an unsolved problem. Is how to ensure that the Oracle's trust doesn't do that and doesn't cheat, doesn't do something like that and ruin the marketplace. So he asked me, don't tell me about the rest of your prediction market. Tell me specifically how you solved the Oracle problem. And my eyes lit up, and I didn't solve the Oracle problem. I didn't know you could solve the Oracle problem. I just said you have to have an honest Oracle, and then I figured out the rest of everything. And he was like, well, that's everyone's problem. Everyone's overlooking the fact that with Hivemind, I solved, speaking as Paul Sports, that I solved the Oracle problem. Well, I've never even read the Hivemind white paper, so I have no idea how he solves it, or if he solves it. But he linked me to it, and it's like 80 pages of a lot of it's like advanced mathematics that I don't understand yet. So he was showing me graphs and charts and things. Like, oh, he uses matrix multiplications. I don't know, and eigenvectors or eigenvectors or something. I don't know what those things are. So I have no idea, but I did all this work making a protocol that can work on Bitcoin, and it turns out I was solving the wrong problem. I wasn't solving the Oracle problem because I didn't know it was possible to solve that. But yeah, now I got to read that paper and figure that out, and then see if I can make an implementation of that. But the rest of it, I think I figured out. I think the protocol I came up with, which I call Agius, I think that can work. I think you can do it on Bitcoin, and it'll work. So if anyone wants to get rich, go make it. Go read my protocol, to check out my demo code, and make a real version, and go and make $100 million, or however much money Polymarket's making. Get after it, guys. It's all open source, public domain.
I guess there's also, what do you call this? Don't be a dick. This principle where if you're using somebody else's open source code to get rich, like, remember about them, give them like a small percentage of what you actually made.
I make no such stipulation. But if you do make $1 million, I would not mind a percentage, but I make no such stipulation that you'd be a dick or such if you don't.
This way, you don't have to be the one who theoretically sends other people 5 Bitcoin to present their case. You're actually gonna be the one who receives 5 Bitcoin from someone who built on top of your open source code.
I don't know. Usually, most of the time, I don't receive anything, but we'll see. Maybe a couple times I have. Maybe this would be one of those times. Anyway, I built out the protocol, built out demo code for 2/3 of it. I haven't actually implemented the third part yet, which is the part where you can transfer your position before the game has actually happened. So I haven't implemented that, but it's very similar to the second part, which is where you create the PSBT. So yeah, it should work. I just haven't done it yet. Anyway, someone else should work on it too, and then I won't be the only one working on this thing. To that end, later today, I'm supposed to talk to the guy from Predix, Predyx. I have an appointment to talk with him. He wants to learn more about my protocol. He's looking for a way to make Predix, which is a Bitcoin prediction market that's custodial. He wants to make it non-custodial. And I said, I think my ideas can help him get there. So we're going to be talking to him about it later today. But now you've all heard the scoop. You learned about it before him.
Yeah, and I hope this was good practice for you to be able to explain it better.
Yep. Have you seen any questions about it?
Not directly. There's someone who wants to know if you have any favorite mathematicians, cryptographers, or thought leaders in general that you think people would find interesting, dead or alive.
Mathematicians who I think people would find interesting, dead or alive. Robin Linus is interesting, and I think he's a cryptographer or mathematician, something along those lines. So check out his work. He does good stuff. Liam Egan is another one. He's alive, and he does like bulletproofs and stuff. So check out his work. I think he works at Alpen Labs now. Dead ones, I don't know. I don't really know a lot about the history of cryptography, or at least nothing much is coming to mind in that department. So no, I can't say that I can't think of anything relevant to say about historical ones.
I mean, those are pretty good examples. Robin is brilliant. He's the creator of BitVM. Liam is also responsible for creating a bunch of interesting and smart ways to fix existing stuff. Like, he's sort of a hero in the Monero community for improving bulletproofs. And he also has some contributions to other projects.
Regarding Robin Linus creating BitVM, I also helped. So that was...
Yes, you should get credit for that.
I think so. And Robin thinks so. So we all think so.
I remember at one point 2 years ago when I met you for the first time, you were saying that some BSV people invited you as soon as BitVM came out so that you could argue in favor of Bitcoin being Turing complete, which is something that Craig Wright has been saying for many years now.
Yeah, I got on a BSV, some sort of BSV podcast, and did a lengthy interview with them going over this, including the fact that it was some of Craig Wright's work that inspired me to work on BitVM before it existed, to like work in that direction. There was a really smart guy, I forget what his name is, in the BSV community, who used the new opcodes available in BSV that were, I guess they're not really new opcodes, the old opcodes that like opcat and stuff that Satoshi had put in the original Bitcoin implementation. He used those to create something called a Turing machine. And one of the precursors to BitVM was me trying to recreate that using the opcodes that are available in Bitcoin script today, like the ones we still have after all the old ones got disabled. So I recreated a lot of the work that BSV people were doing, but directly on Bitcoin, trying to recreate like Turing machines and virtual computers and stuff. And it was my work on that stuff that got Robin's attention, and then he realized that like you could do this in an extensible way. You could make it so that you could have arbitrarily long computer programs. The stuff that I was doing was limited. It was limited by the size of Bitcoin scripts. But yeah, like the precursors to BitVM came from me trying to recreate BSV's technology. And so they thought that was very funny and cool. And I don't know, I think that's a cool part of the history of BitVM, is it kind of, in one way, it goes back to Craig Wright.
Yeah. Well, when you think about it, this was a 2015 Las Vegas conference where basically Craig Wright was still entering the scene, and he had not claimed that he's Satoshi yet. He was just quietly trying to get acquainted to everyone in Bitcoin. And he was on a panel with Nick Szabo and Trace Mayer. Basically, Craig Wright was on the screen like the Wizard of Oz, and Trace Mayer and Nick Szabo were there in person. And Craig Wright made this claim that Bitcoin is Turing complete, and Nick Szabo said, no, it's not. And then Craig Wright said, well, I'll prove it to you. And Nick Szabo said, okay, write a paper and I'll read it when it's ready. And Craig Wright never published that paper as far as I know. But it seems like you guys sort of made an effort to prove him wrong, to prove him right.
Yeah, well, there was a guy on the BSV blockchain who did a lot of experiments trying to prove that you could make Turing machines in Bitcoin script. And I thought they were valid proofs. I thought he proved that you could do it if you had the old opcodes that got removed, like opcat. But I also thought you could do it without those. And so I made several proofs of concept showing that, well, I think they demonstrated that it is possible to do it. They're just very limited in size because Bitcoin scripts can't be very big. They can be like 4 megabytes maximum. And even there, like the specific way that I did it is really inefficient. But then Robin Linus saw my work and he was like, I know how to make it so they can be arbitrarily long. And he, the Lamport signature stuff, he taught me. And so I made some apps using Lamport signatures in my precursors to BitVM. But then, he wrote a paper about how you can use them for arbitrarily long stuff. And thus BitVM became a thing. But yeah, that was a lot of it came from me trying to recreate stuff they've been doing in BSV for a few years now.
Yeah, this is actually a pretty cool piece of history. I hope that everyone who stuck around up until this point has caught this, because it's something that gives you credit for possibly the most important discovery that we've had in Bitcoin over the last 5-6 years. maybe it's going to be the most powerful tool that we're going to be using to build significant improvements on Bitcoin without asking for permission to activate soft forks. And
I'm sure you can find a post by Gregory Maxwell in 2013 outlining how you can do all this. It just got overlooked for a long time. Or Jeremy Rubin, he probably talked about it in one of his Advent calendar posts.
yeah, it's possible, but nobody actually took the time to code this. Like, ideas were floating around. You can find a lot of ideas on Bitcoin Talk. There's even, so next week I'm gonna invite Jonathan from BitMEX Research, and he's also the author of the Block Size Wars, and he also pointed out in a recent article that this spam debate was being had back in 2010 or something with Satoshi and Hal Finney and a bunch of OGs who were there, and the exact same arguments about CP and whatever were being presented by some concerned users. And it seems like every cycle we get a new subset, a new category of users. Of course, unfortunately, part of the mass adoption process is that I guess the arguments get dumbed down every time. Like, if you look at how they were discussing stuff like improvements during the block size wars, it was very intellectual and it was more respectful than it is today. I mean, the outcome was unfortunate, but at least these people were meeting at actual conferences called Scaling Bitcoin and presenting their proposals. And there was a lot of mutual respect, even if the outcome was not obvious or certain. And yeah, I just wish we had more of this as opposed to... No, I mean, we had more of that as opposed to this, which we have today, where people block each other even though they have been friends for many years, and they just find themselves at different sides or on different sides of this debate for various reasons.
Well, for a respectful take on this debate, I recommend reading the thread on Nostr between myself and Aaron Reardon. So check that out. I think it'll be in the show notes, or hopefully. But I gotta go. I gotta prepare to talk to the guy from Predix. I think my meeting with him is in about 15 minutes. So I gotta get my slideshow ready and check my demo code and make sure it works. And
I'll let you go.
This is a good time to.
If there's any way for people to follow you or something, like just promote
you can check out
your work.
Check out my website, supertestnet.org. View all my projects there, as well as my social media handles. On Twitter, I'm at supertestnet, all one word, no underscores or spaces or anything. Same on Telegram. That's also me on Telegram. And on Nostr, I am supertestnet with a space between them. So you can check me out on there, search for supertestnet. And on GitHub, I'm supertestnet, one word with no underscores or spaces or anything. So you can follow my work on my GitHub as well.
Yeah, before I close this, I just want to read this one, this one comment without actually commenting on what it means. But this guy says, if you ever wanted to know why altcoins exist, it's because of situations like this. We are free to decide whether or not we want to mine, develop, or send transactions in whatever coin we want. We don't have to be subject to any one person's ideas of what money is, how it should work, who should be able to participate in it, etc. So yeah, I think the lesson that we need to learn is that every time we are having this sort of infighting, there's an altcoin that's rising. Last time it was Ethereum. This time it's probably Zcash. So it's just how markets work.
Thank you all. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye. And thank you all for being here and subscribing and liking and whatever. And thanks to the sponsors. I'll see you in the next one.